Moonlight filters through the cold bars of a prison cell, setting a somber and oppressive tone. A black-haired man with glowing red eyes mercilessly sinks his teeth into a woman's skin without hesitation. The pink-haired girl questions the author about the cruel, violent events that have just unfolded. She protests the brutal biting as the dark-haired man remains latched onto her arm with predatory intensity. Blood drips from a fresh bite wound, a vivid and painful reminder of the man's feral nature. The narrator reflects on how this nonsense began just one day before she turned 20 years old. A brown-haired boy named Emil runs through a sunny orchard, calling out a name with urgency. The pink-haired Renatus turns toward the voice, her face partially obscured by the lush green leaves. Reyna stands amidst bright yellow flowers, appearing surprised and radiant in the warm morning light. Out of breath, Emil catches up to Reyna and explains he has been frantically searching for her. Reyna grows suspicious when Emil admits he was specifically looking for her instead of her sister, Estella. Emil shyly presents a red ribbon as an early 20th birthday gift, catching Reyna completely off guard. Reyna's joy sours when Emil asks her to deliver a far more expensive ribbon to her sister. Narration introduces Emil as a sweet but timid boy, the son of a local tenant farmer. Reyna fumes, realizing Emil is only being generous to her to get closer to her older sister. Reyna explains she is delivering a heavy sack to Grandma Langshid as they walk along the path. Hoping to impress her sister, Emil eagerly offers to carry the heavy sack for Reyna instead. Emil instantly regrets his chivalry as he struggles and trembles under the unexpectedly heavy burden. Renatus laughs brightly, thanking Emil for his help while he continues to struggle in the background. Reyna skips away happily, leaving the poor boy behind to suffer with the heavy load alone. The pink-haired girl runs through the village, her spirits high as her milestone birthday finally approaches. Although her family is not wealthy, Reyna enjoys a simple, happy life among her kind neighbors. She spots her sister working in the distance and waves enthusiastically to catch her attention.
Estella, Reyna's beautiful and kind-hearted older sister, looks up from her gardening with a warm smile.
Reyna rushes into Estella's arms for a hug, happy to be back home after her errand. The two sisters share a close bond, with Estella having raised Reyna since their mother's passing. Chibi memories show the many ways Estella worked tirelessly in the fields to provide for Reyna. Holding an apple Reyna brought, Estella suggests they enjoy the fruit together after their next meal. Reyna gazes at her older sister with pure adoration, grateful for her constant love and support. On the eve of her birthday, Reyna dreams of becoming an adult to help ease Estella's burdens. She rests her head, counting down the final minutes until she officially turns 20 years old. Tick-tock sounding, the clock hands move toward midnight, signaling the start of the girl's milestone birthday. Bong! The clock tolls, and a sudden, overwhelming rush of memories and sensations floods Reyna's mind. A dark, intense vision consumes her, showing a black-haired man looming over her in the shadows. The man mocks her pleas to stop as the scene turns increasingly suffocating and terrifyingly intimate. Reyna awakens with a scream as the horrifying realization of her sister's identity takes root. A worried Estella rushes to Reyna's side, frantically asking her sister what is wrong. Gasping for air, Reyna realizes she has been reincarnated into a mature novel she once read. She recalls the protagonist, Grand Duke Karuo, a man cursed with a lineage of madness and violence. Reyna's mind reels as she looks at a suggestive-looking radish, haunted by the novel's graphic themes. Reyna frantically hacks at the ground with a hoe, trying to banish the lewd thoughts from her mind. She cringes, remembering how the novel's plot centered on explicit and obsessive encounters with the Duke. Estella and Emil watch in confusion as Reyna has an internal crisis regarding the novel's graphic plot.
Reyna slumps over in despair, mourning the loss of her innocence as the reality of the situation sinks in.
Estella tenderly checks Reyna's forehead, deeply worried that her younger sister has suddenly fallen ill.
Estella insists that Reina rest for the day, but Reina can only stare at her sister in terror.
The horrifying truth settles in. Estella is actually the doomed female lead of this tragic, obsessive story. Reina envisions the Duke's insane obsession and how he will eventually drain Estella of her life.
The vision ends with Estella's tragic demise in a dark dungeon, leaving Reina desperate to change fate. Determined to alter the future, Leonidas refuses to let her sister perish and proposes a specific birthday wish. In a soft, strawberry-patterned memory, Estella offers a simple picnic while Leonidas remains focused on her solemn goal. Under the bright garden sun, Leonidas urgently begs her sister to flee in the night to escape destiny. Throughout the following week, Leonidas uses every tactic from tantrums to closet-dwelling shock therapy to convince her sister. The scene shifts to the imposing and gloomy house of Karu, where the cursed lineage resides in shadow. Inside the dimly lit mansion, the black-haired Grand Duke Karuo stumbles in a fit of agonizing, blue-tinted madness. With eyes glowing a predatory red, the Duke gasps and snarls, his mind consumed by thoughts of a witch. A mysterious blue-haired woman in a sun hat and glasses smiles enigmatically from the shadows, watching the unfolding drama. Back at the cottage, the pink-haired Estella holds a basket of potatoes and firmly rejects her sister's suggestions. Leonidas argues that as an adult, she is capable of handling the dangers of a midnight escape and survival. Flashbacks detail Leonidas's relentless efforts, including attempting to hypnotize Estella in bed and scaring her in the kitchen. Leonidas suggests that Estella should run away with a mule, but the blunt suggestion leaves her older sister visibly flustered. Dismissing the romantic notion, Estella insists she has no such feelings for the boy and tells Leonidas to cook. A quick puff of a pout reveals Leonidas' disbelief, certain that her sister is merely hiding her true heart. As Estella works at the counter, Leonidas reflects on how her sister actually harbors deep affection for their neighbor. Despite her love, Leonidas concludes that the simple emule is far too plain for the most beautiful girl alive. Leonidas stares with intense blue eyes, recalling the horrifying abuse her sister suffered in the original graphic novel. A dark vision reveals Estella weeping in a cold stone cell, trapped by the obsession of a wealthy madman. Snapping back to reality, Leonidas asks her sister what she would do if Leonidas herself fled with a mule. She claims she will earn their living as a palace maid, though Estella questions her lack of formal credentials. To prove her worth, Leonidas grunts and heaves massive stones, demonstrating her surprising raw strength to her shocked sister. With tears pricking her eyes, the girl begs her sister to finally listen and understand the depth of her fear. Estella remains silent, looking down at her younger sister who is kneeling in desperate, emotional supplication on the floor. Kneeling beside her, Estella gently but firmly tells Reina to stop her childish behavior and return to reality. Leonidas looks up with wide, hopeful eyes, but her plea is suddenly interrupted by a violent noise at the door. A heavy crash sounding, the door is kicked open by their disheveled, black-haired father wielding a half-empty bottle. The sisters huddle together in terror as the drunk, mustachioed man looms over them, reeking of alcohol and malice. The father barks insults at Estella for not greeting him, while she timidly explains she was only preparing dinner. Trembling, Leonidas hides behind her sister's skirts as the man's aggressive shadow stretches across the small wooden kitchen. As the man drinks greedily, Leonidas reflects on the bitterness of having such an angry, biological father. She watches him from the floor, certain he has gambled away the meager savings Estella worked so hard to earn. A sharp smash sounding, the father hurls a bottle in a rage, screaming at Estella while Leonidas shields her head. The man strikes his eldest daughter, sending her sprawling across the floor as Leonidas cries out in sheer horror. He grabs Estella roughly, accusing her of arrogance, while the selfless sister begs him to spare Rhinatus from his wrath. The father scowls with a hateful expression, showing no remorse for the pain he inflicts on his own family. Snarling about the wasted liquor, the man demands they pay for the mess before storming off into the night. A heavy silence falls over the kitchen, leaving Rhinatus collapsed on the floor, paralyzed by the trauma of the encounter. Shaking off her own pain, Estella rushes to her younger sister's side, her voice filled with frantic sisterly concern. She checks Rhinatus for injuries, terrified that the flying shards of broken glass might have wounded her during the struggle. Rhinatus looks her sister in the eye and asks how much longer they must endure this cycle of violence. She points to the jagged fragments on the floor, warning that their luck will eventually run out if they stay. Estella listens with a heavy heart, her face shadowed by the realization that their home is no longer a sanctuary. When Rhinatus suggests a joint escape, Estella sadly shakes her head, knowing the risk of being hunted is too great. With a grim set to her jaw, Rhinatus argues that a temporary separation is the only way to ensure survival. Looking through the window at the setting sun, Rhinatus proposes they reunite in town once she secures a job. She forces a bright, tearful smile, promising to become a successful maid so they can live in peace together. Tears stream down Estella's face as she finally relents, her heart breaking at the thought of leaving her sister behind. The sisters share a final, desperate embrace in the fading light, cementing their pact to escape their father's cruelty. In the quiet blue dawn, Emule arrives to assist as the two sisters prepare for Estella's secret, heartbreaking departure. Emule helps the sisters with their final preparations, leaving Rhinatus impressed by the boys' surprising reliability and maturity. Watching from the shadows, Rhinatus feels a wave of relief that her older sister is in good hands. Estella grasps Rhinatus's hands, reminding her that no matter how much she grows, she remains her precious little sister. Through her tears, Estella begs Rhinatus to call for help if things become difficult, her sisterly love shining bright. Rhinatus recalls the novel's plot, knowing Estella would always sacrifice her own safety to protect her younger sibling. Their hands remain clasped as Rhinatus silently prays for Estella to find a life of joy instead of tragedy. The sisters share a final, tender moment, their foreheads touching as Rhinatus declares her eternal love for her sister. As the figures disappear into the night, Rhinatus stands resolute, ready to face whatever consequences this choice brings. A heart-wrenching sob escapes the girl as she waves a final goodbye to the sister who raised her. Silence falls over the orchard, leaving Rhinatus alone with her thoughts and the heavy weight of her sister's departure. The young girl breaks down into uncontrollable tears, the reality of her newfound loneliness hitting her like a wave. Huddled on the cold stone path, Rhinatus weeps for the life she just gave up to save her sister. Wiping her eyes, Rhinatus forces herself to focus on the next phase of her plan to secure their future. With a sudden burst of determination, the girl resolves that her first act of adulthood is to imprison her father. In a distant vision, the tortured hero Karuo pines for his enchantress, unaware of the changes to his fate. Rhinatus reflects on her father's misplaced rage, realizing he only targeted her because she always stood by Estella's side. A dark shadow of her father looms over the sisters, reinforcing the girl's memory of his deep-seated, irrational hatred. Gazing into a pool of water, Rhinatus notes that her resemblance to her mother is the source of her father's malice. Chibi memories show Rhinatus struggling with chores, feeling it's unfair to be hated for a mother she never knew. A quick thud sounding, Rhinatus reaches for the door, focused on the immediate task of dealing with her father. Rhinatus celebrates her success with a bright smile, having finally locked her father away behind the heavy wooden door. She confidently explains that her father is trapped for good, proud of the meticulous preparations she made at dawn.
A sudden realization crosses Rhinitis's face as she turns toward the door, her blue eyes wide with unexpected surprise. A refined man with a monocle stands outside, looking shocked to find the young girl waiting for him there. Rhinitis greets the stranger, keeping a wary eye on the refined gentleman who just appeared at her doorstep. She studies the man carefully, wondering if this unexpected visitor is a friend or a new threat to her safety.
Chibi icons show the man staring intensely at Rhinitis, making her feel self-conscious under his unwavering gaze.
Rhinitis touches her hair, suspecting that the rare pink color of her locks has piqued the stranger's curiosity.
A cascade of pink hair fills the frame, a rare and beautiful trait that marks her family as special. The girl ponders the novel's details, searching her memory for any mention of this man or her unique appearance.
The man introduces himself as Ordi Eagle from the Duke's palace, while Rhinitis recognizes him as a future kidnapper.
Putting on an innocent face, Rhinitis asks the man from the Duke's estate what could possibly bring him here.
Ordi Eagle looks down with a serious expression, stating he has something important to communicate to the young girl.
A loud shout sounding, someone calls for the sisters, cutting through the tense atmosphere of the unexpected meeting. The man's tone becomes demanding as he questions her ability to escape the favors he has provided for her.
Overwhelmed by the chaotic turn of events, Chibi Rhinitis clutches her head, desperately wishing for a simple nap.
Rhinitis points to the door and tells the man not to worry about her father locked inside the house. Realizing she's being misunderstood, Chibi Rhinitis has a frantic breakdown, unable to believe the mess she's created. She explains through chibi icons that her father suffers from a violent mental illness whenever he consumes alcohol.
Ordi Eagle dismisses her excuses, insisting they set aside the matter of her father to discuss his true purpose.
The man speaks with cold professionalism, preparing to lay out the terms of his visit to the cottage. Ordi Eagle steps closer, catching Rhinitis off guard as she stares up at him with wide, shocked blue eyes. A look of revelation washes over Rhinitis's face, her eyes sparkling as she recognizes a pivotal moment in the story.
Rhinitis mentally cycles through various fake reactions, plotting her best path to manipulate the man's perception of her.
With a single word, Rhinitis agrees to his terms, her resolve hardening despite her inner turmoil and fear. She boldly declares her intention to travel to the Cairo Major Duchy, surprising the man with her sudden cooperation. Rhinitis lets out a panicked cry, her mind racing as the weight of her choice begins to set in. Looking around her new surroundings, Rhinitis realizes the small room from the novel is actually a prison cell. She reflects on the novel's descriptions, her face showing the strain of surviving within this dark and obsessive world. Standing in the center of the vast stone courtyard, Rhinitis realizes she is now trapped within the Duke's fortress. Rhinitis gasps in alarm as Ordi Eagle and several armored guards lead her through the dark corridor. Chibi Rhinitis fumes with indignation while Ordi Eagle casually dismisses her protests about being thrown into prison. Walking past heavy iron bars, Rhinitis wonders how her sister Estella managed to endure such terrifying conditions. Chibi Rhinitis trembles with fear as she follows Ordi Eagle down the stone stairs into the dungeon's depths. A sudden gasp sounding, the pink-haired girl freezes in terror as she senses someone watching from the shadows. Rhinitis huddles on a wooden cot while Ordi Eagle approaches a heavy door with a flickering candle. A heavy thud sounding, the door swings open as Rhinitis cries out in protest against her sudden confinement. Ordi Eagle peers into the dark room, coldly ordering Rhinitis to settle the person waiting inside the cell. A loud clank sounding, Rhinitis falls to her knees as the heavy iron door is locked behind her. Rhinitis bangs desperately on the cell door, screaming at the man for abandoning her in such a place. A sharp, ugh sounding,
The girl pauses her shouting as she feels an oppressive presence lurking nearby.
Reynatus leans against the door, reflecting on how her sister was the only reason she came here.
Turning toward the darkness, she realizes that her appearance and personality are far different from her gentle sister. She compares herself to her sister Estella, seeing herself as merely a strong child with light blue eyes.
Reynatus stares into the empty room, certain that the novel's hero would never fall in love with her.
A steady thud sounding, heavy footsteps approach from the shadows as Reynatus watches with growing apprehension. She imagines a muscular man as her ideal type, hoping to avoid the obsessive madness described in the novel. Chibi Reynatus recalls lifting heavy sacks in the village, proving she was far stronger than any local boys.
In a memory, she jokingly asks if there are any animalistic men around while her sister watches.
A dark, towering shadow looms over Reynatus, making her realize the terrifying reality of her current situation. A monstrous black beast appears behind the disheveled man, causing Reynatus to scream in absolute paralyzing horror.
She recognizes the black-haired man as Theodore de Caro, the novel's hero who is currently gripped by madness.
Theodore stalks toward her in the dim light, mirroring the exact moment he first met Estella in the story. A violent crash sounding, Theodore lunges at Reynatus and pins her down in a fit of wild, uncontrollable rage.
Reynatus remembers how Estella was once bewildered by the man's handsome face and his strikingly mad red eyes.
She trembles as the man looms over her in the dungeon, his presence radiating an aura of bloodthirsty instability.
Recalling the novel's plot, Reynatus notes that Theodore originally bit her sister's neck to suck her blood.
Reynatus cries out in terror, terrified that she is about to be devoured by the maddened Duke's heir. Thanks to her quick reflexes, she manages to dodge his initial strike, though he still catches her arm. A tearing sound echoing, Theodore sits on the floor, chewing aggressively on a piece of Reynatus's blood-stained sleeve.
Theodore pauses and mentions her scent, leaving Reynatus shocked and staring at him with wide blue eyes.
Reynatus watches the man intently, wondering if his brief moment of speech means he is regaining his senses.
Attempting to talk like an adult, she realizes he is still acting like a wild animal and flees.
A rapid top sounding, Theodore chases Reynatus through the small, stone room as she desperately looks for escape. Recalling Emil's past advice, Reynatus decides to stop running and face the man like a wild beast. In a flashback, Emil warns her never to show her back when facing a dangerous predatory animal. He explains that eye contact and backing away slowly are the only ways to survive such an encounter. Reynatus focuses her gaze, preparing to use her brother's survival tactics against the maddened man before her.
She glares bravely at Theodore, trying to project strength and show that she isn't intimidated by him.
Chibi Theodore with cot ears stops in his tracks, looking confused and embarrassed by her intense, unwavering stare. A sudden slip sounding, Reynatus loses her balance just as she hoped to endure the night in safety. She falls backward as Theodore lunges toward her, his hands reaching out to catch his vulnerable prey.
Reynatus gasps as the man grabs her, his eyes glowing with a terrifying, predatory red light.
She freezes in his grip, realizing her plan to stay away has completely failed in this small cell. Chibi Reynatus cries out that Emil is a liar, while a chibi version of him denies all responsibility. A heavy drip sounding, fresh blood falls onto the cold stone floor as the violent encounter continues.
Theodore holds her wrist firmly, looming over her with a look of intense hunger and madness.
A primal scream sounding, Reynatus shrieks in terror as the man finally bites into her arm. A quiet sip sounding, Theodore drinks her blood while Reynatus resolves to strike back before she dies. Chibi Reynatus apologizes to her sister as Theodore huddles against her in the dark, silent dungeon.
Chibi, Theodore, and Rhinatus hug amidst a cloud of question marks, signaling a confusing change in the man's behavior.
Rhinitus notices the Duke's biting force weakening as she stares at him in the dim blue light of the cell. Close up, Theodore's red eyes remain glazed over as he continues to gnaw on the fabric of her sleeve.
Shocked by the sudden shift in the scene, Rhinitus watches the man with wide, glowing blue eyes.
Chibi Rhinatus panics and screams while the black-haired man persists in his animalistic behavior, ignoring her protests.
Rhinatus looks away with a troubled expression, trying to understand why this encounter is deviating from the original novel.
Narration describes Theodore as a beast-like protagonist who satisfies his instincts by attacking the heroine immediately upon their meeting. Rhinitus observes the scars around Theodore's mouth, a testament to the physical toll his inherited madness has taken on him. She notices his cracked, wounded nails, realizing the intense pain he must have suffered while trapped alone in the dungeon.
A steady thud sounding. A flashback reveals hands banging on a dark door as the boy's lonely suffering is detailed.
Chibi Rhinatus cries out for her father and begs to be let out from the dark, terrifying confinement of her past. Tears stream down her face as she admits her mistakes, desperately calling for her sister during a moment of childhood trauma. Returning to the present, Rhinitus holds the man close, noting that he seems entirely different from the monster described.
A soft tap sounding, she gently pats his back and reassures him that everything is okay as he clings to her.
Theodore rests his head on her shoulder, his red eyes softening as she whispers that he is finally safe. Rhinatus embraces him fully, her expression softening into one of genuine compassion for the cursed man in her arms. She ponders her own actions, confused as to why she is showing such kindness to someone she intended to manipulate. Fascinated by his changing eyes, she watches as a hint of purple begins to replace the bloodthirsty red in his gaze. A sudden thud sounding, Theodore goes limp and collapses against her, catching the pink-haired girl completely off guard. Rhinatus looks down at the black-haired man in her arms, wondering if he has finally succumbed to a deep sleep.
Resting his head in her lap, she wonders if the small amount of blood he consumed was enough to calm his madness.
Theodore sleeps peacefully for the first time, his features relaxed and free from the strain of his former rage. Sitting on the cold stone floor, Rhinitus reflects on the unexpected peace that has settled over the dark dungeon cell. Her thoughts are interrupted by the appearance of a shiny pink creature, which stands out against the grim prison background. The pink slime shouts for her attention, leaving Rhinitus staring at it with a look of utter bewilderment. Chibi Rhinatus's eyes pop out in shock as she tries to process the presence of a fantasy creature in this world.
A quick boing sounding, the slime bounces away while Rhinitus jokes that someone has definitely chosen the wrong story genre.
She recalls the novel's lore, which explicitly stated there were no monsters or magic, only the hereditary Caro family madness. Rhinatus stares at the glossy, translucent surface of the pink blob, unable to believe what is standing before her.
A shimmering shine sounding, the creature looks up with large black eyes, causing Rhinitus to yell in surprise.
Chibi Rhinatus points a finger at the intruder, loudly declaring that no matter how she looks at it, it's a slime.
A loud thud sounding, the pink creature reacts with indignation, finding her label of low-level monster to be incredibly harsh. The creature throws a tantrum, demanding respect as a high-ranking demon and threatening the girl for her disrespectful comments.
Rhinitus asks the creature what it actually is if it refuses to be called a slime. Her curiosity finally piqued.
The pink blob proudly announces that its name is Sujin, wearing a happy expression as it introduces itself.
Rhinitus forces a polite smile and asks Mr. Sujin to clarify exactly what kind of race a high-ranking demon is.
Chibi Renatus apologizes for her rudeness and introduces herself as a human named Renatus Gratia with a bright, fake smile.
A crow sounding, an awkward silence fills the dungeon as the girl, the sleeping man, and the pink slime stare.
Renatus bluntly repeats that he is just a slime, causing Sujin to scream that his current body is merely a vessel. Sujin hops onto her head to assert dominance, though Reanitis simply complains that the high-ranking demon is surprisingly heavy. The pink slime bursts into tears and throws a fit, unable to handle being treated like a common, squishy monster. A quick whoosh sounding, Sujin hops away in a huff, calling her an impudent human as he retreats into the shadows. Reanitis' attention is pulled back to the man in her lap as she senses a sudden change in the atmosphere.
A quiet sounding. She gasps and looks down at Theodore, whose presence seems to be fading from the cell.
A sharp gasp sounding, Reanitis reaches out as she realizes the man is about to disappear before her very eyes. A shimmering chime sounding, the girl finds herself alone in the dungeon as Theodore has vanished without a trace. Reanitis looks downcast, realizing that despite her efforts to change the story's origin, the core events remain the same. She sits alone in the vast, empty stone room, pondering the strange and magical turn her life has taken. A painful groan sounding, the scene shifts to a grand office where Theodore clutches his desk in agony. Theodore collapses onto the ornate carpet, gasping for air as the lingering effects of his madness continue to haunt him. A pained gasp sounding, Theodore clutches his chest in agony as he struggles to regain his breath.
His father stands over his collapsed form, staring down at his suffering son with a chillingly indifferent expression.
Within the grand office, the Duke coldly warns Theodore that he will die like his brother, if necessary. Leaning in, the Duke issues a final, stern command to spare the life of the captured enchantress. In a somber flashback, Theodore recalls the distant, unfeeling words spoken by his father before he lost consciousness. The advice given to the young heir was never warm or parental, but merely cold and theoretical instructions. Flanked by knights, a younger Theodore is restrained as he undergoes the brutal awakening of his family's curse. The Duke's profile remains hard and unforgiving, while his words carry the weight of both warning and order. Theodore feels adrift in a sea of red, reflecting on the father who never offered him a single kindness. He remembers the terrifying pain of his sudden rage and the horror of seeing his own hands become claws. Kneeling before the Duke, the boy desperately yearned for a simple reassurance that the suffering would soon end. Huddled in despair, Theodore considers that death might be more merciful than expecting warmth from his cold-hearted father. He acknowledges the futility of his hopes, realizing he can never expect comfort from a man like the Duke. A sudden spark of purple returns to Theodore's gaze as he begins to stir from his deep, troubled sleep. Reanitis holds him close, her gentle smile and soft promise of safety cutting through his long, lonely darkness. Theodore's eyes snap open, his purple gaze reflecting a mix of bewilderment and the lingering warmth of her embrace. Waking in his ornate bed, the heir looks around the room with a start, wondering where he is. A man in a gray suit enters, relieved to find that Theodore has finally returned to his senses. A soft clench sounding, Theodore examines his hands, relieved to see that his lethal claws have completely vanished. Staring into the distance, he is struck by a sudden realization regarding how he was actually saved. Panic-stricken, Theodore demands to know where the enchantress is, only to learn she is being held downstairs. A heavy stomp sounding, Theodore bolts from the bedroom in a desperate rush to reach the pink-haired girl. Driven by an urgent need to find her, he races through the halls toward the cold dungeon. A sudden boom sounding, Theodore throws open the cell door, terrified that Reanitis might have been injured.
Chibi Theodore stops in shock as he finds the girls standing silently in the corner of the dark cell.
Rhinitis begins to weep, complaining that the treatment she has received is completely unacceptable and more than necessary.
Theodore watches in confusion as she rants about her rights instead of showing any fear of his presence.
Chibi Rhinitis lists her grievances, furious about the stone floor and the lack of proper housing and food.
A frantic sob sounding, the girl cries out about her hunger, leaving the Duke's heir feeling entirely baffled.
Gesturing wildly, Rhinitis demands to know how she is expected to survive without even 2 meals a day.
She recalls being abandoned in the cold prison while Theodore was taken away, her frustration reaching its peak.
Rhinitis continues her passionate outburst, fearing that starvation will prevent her from performing her duties correctly.
A soft rustle sounding, Theodore approaches the girl, noting her extreme dissatisfaction with the conditions of her confinement.
Rhinitis suddenly pauses, her face turning red as she becomes flustered by the close proximity of his handsome voice.
Surrounded by flowers, she admires the Duke's stunning appearance and wonders why he came to the cell himself.
Chibi Rhinitis observes the stable light in his purple eyes, relieved to see he is no longer acting animalistic. Theodore asks why she has frozen up, and the girl lets out a startled, high-pitched yes in response. Looking down, Theodore refers to himself as a monster, testing the girl's reaction to his true, cursed nature. Close up, Rhinitis's blue eyes widen as she flashes back to the terrifying intensity of the previous night.
She remembers the vulnerability in Theodore's gaze, likening him to a lost child flickering in the deep darkness. Rhinitis realizes she recognizes that specific pained look, though her interpretation of it is unexpectedly unique. In her vivid imagination, Rhinitis interprets Theodore's behavior as a severe case of rebellious teenage puberty.
Theodore wonders if his monstrous state was too terrifying for her to speak, his expression turning somber. Rhinitis tries to soothe him with a bright smile, claiming he was as harmless and cute as a rabbit. Theodore stares at her in stunned silence, mentally imagining himself wearing black rabbit ears after her strange comparison. Chibi Rhinitis panics as Theodore radiates a dark, predatory aura, realizing her attempt at a compliment was a disaster. Fidgeting nervously, Rhinitis tries to clarify her words, insisting she didn't mean to call him a literal rabbit. Theodore stands with his arms crossed, listening as she clumsily tries to justify her claim that red eyes are cute. A quick puff sounding, Chibi Theodore asks if she truly finds him cute, causing Rhinitis to break down.
Rhinitis worries she has offended the Duke, silently acknowledging that he is actually far more handsome than cute.
Rhinitis reflects on Theodore's undeniable charisma, truly seeing him as the male lead of a romance novel.
She admires his wild beauty and finds his subdued voice makes him even more attractive despite the ruins.
Chibi Rhinitis realizes that while a wolf is charming, she prefers the loyalty of a big, wagging dog.
Theodore asks what she did to him, as Rhinitis hopes their relationship remains strictly professional and safe. She laughingly points to the wound on her arm, suggesting he was the one who did something painful.
Chibi heads exchange dialogue as Theodore asks if that's her only injury, and Rhinitis defends its significance. A sharp gaze sounding, Rhinitis wonders if Theodore was only half-conscious and remembers nothing of his madness.
Shocked, Rhinitis' profile reflects a sudden realization as she processes the man's confusing and suspicious questions.
She ponders if Theodore's query about her actions was actually concern regarding her survival during his violent state.
Rhinitis fears that if he suspects her, he might seek out the original protagonist, the beautiful Estella Gratia. Surrounded by roses, the image of the pink-haired Estella Gratia represents the heroine Rhinitis is trying to protect. She is determined to keep her sister far away so Estella can live well and avoid the curse.
A soft clench sounding.
she recalls how the novel's lead fainted after losing blood to the male lead. A bright flash sounding, her eyes light up as she decides to mimic the original story's dramatic faint. Chibi Renatus puts on an act, claiming she feels dizzy, while Theodore watches her strange behavior with confusion. A dramatic sway sounding, she blames her anemia on the blood Theodore drank from her the night before. Spinning in place, Renatus nervously worries if her first attempt at fainting will actually be painless and convincing. A quick whoosh sounding, she prepares to fall, choosing to just commit to the act of losing consciousness. A loud thud sounding, Renatus collapses onto the hard dungeon floor while a stunned Theodore stands over her. Lying on the ground, she lets out a soft sigh, silently hoping her dramatic performance was enough. A sharp ouch sounding, her mental monologue screams in pain after she accidentally hits her ankle during the fall. Theodore remains silent, leading Renatus to believe that he has completely bought into her fake fainting spell. Reacting to her collapse, Theodore orders that the girl be taken to a proper room for her recovery. Renatus praises her own acting talent, relieved that she won't have to face any more blood-draining interrogations. A quick snap sounding, Renatus suddenly pops up with a yawn, claiming she slept incredibly well after all.
Full of energy, she cheers herself up and decides to walk on her own legs to the mansion.
A quick dash sounding, she runs out of the dungeon, leaving a bewildered Theodore staring in her wake. Theodore stares after her, stunned that someone could shout so loudly and walk so energetically after such trauma. He watches her leave through the stone archway, noting that her lively spirit doesn't seem like an act. A soft swish sounding, Theodore walks away, reflecting on the girl's bizarre and unexpected behavior in the cell. Renatus blushes as she realizes her "slept well" comment was a total giveaway of her fake fainting spell. Brushing back his hair, Theodore smiles softly, seemingly amused or relieved by the girl's genuine and expressive nature. A quiet cough sounding, Theodore looks away and admits he is glad she seems to be doing fine. Renatus runs through the mansion, cringing with embarrassment over the clumsy way she handled her exit.
A joyful shout sounding, she celebrates her escape from the dungeon and falls face first onto a soft surface.
From above, she is seen sprawling happily across a large, luxurious bed in a room far more comfortable.
Renatus marvels at the size of the room, realizing the Duke's guest quarters are bigger than her entire house.
She lies comfortably on the high-quality bed, noting that her arms were treated and the food was delicious. A bright gleam sounding, her eyes shine with excitement as she spots another pleasant surprise in her room.
Renatus stands in awe before a beautiful, clean dress, delighted by the high quality of the Duke's provisions.
A quick spin sounding, she admires the cute ribbons and ruffles of the new dress in the mirror.
Ordi enters the room, informing Renatus that she will be given the public role of a maid.
The brown-haired man explains her task is to serve tea, though her secret duty is calming Theodore's madness.
A bright shine sounding, Renatus is dazzled by the ordinary maid outfit, finding it more beautiful than anything she owns. Chibi Ordi stares in confusion as the girl gets overly excited about a simple, low-ranking uniform. The dress is shown with puffy sleeves and soft fabric, looking far more luxurious than typical commoner clothing.
A soft rub sounding, Renatus hugs the new fabric, overwhelmed by its softness compared to her old, rough clothes. She recalls a birthday gift from her sister, which was one of only 2 dresses she ever owned. Renatus looks down at her current attire, which is now worn, torn, and covered in blood and stains. Ordi watches as she examines her reflection, wondering why she is so attached to her old, damaged clothing.
Renatus reflects on how her sister would have reacted to her current displacement in the mansion.
Looking at the luxurious room, she notes her sister should be here instead of her. She imagines her sister still fast asleep in the high-quality bed following a night of turmoil.
Standing before the mirror, Renatus remains silent as she processes her complex feelings about her role. She takes comfort in knowing her sister is safely being cared for by Emule after their escape.
Renatus clutches her dress tightly, whispering a heartfelt longing for her sister while feeling deeply emotional. A round pink slime suddenly materializes, asking a startled Renatus if she is currently crying.
Tears shimmer in her blue eyes as she stares directly at the mysterious and unexpected visitor.
A soft suction sounding, Renatus looks down at the strange creature and wonders exactly what it is.
The pink slime boldly declares itself the great demon Sujin, insulting Renatus for forgetting its identity. A shimmering light sounding, she questions how the creature entered the locked room, suspecting magical transport. A cheerful bounce sounding, Sujin ignores her confusion, while Renatus expresses disbelief at its sudden arrival.
Considering the monsters and madness around her, Renatus asks Sujin to take her to see her sister. The slime bluntly states it's impossible, leaving the pink-haired girl utterly baffled by its refusal. Renatus quickly apologizes for any teasing, desperate to ensure her sister escapes the mansion safely.
She wonders if there is a magical complication or some other problem preventing Sujin from helping. Looking flustered, the slime admits it lacks such abilities because it isn't the story's main character. Chibi Renatus stands completely frozen in shock by the slime's strange meta-commentary about protagonist status.
A soft squish sounding, Sujin reveals it simply entered through a crack in the door, because it is a slime. A quick pop sounding, Renatus scolds the supreme demon for its underwhelming and mundane entry method.
She sighs deeply, regretting her belief that the pink creature could actually provide any meaningful assistance. Surrounded by flowers, Sujin happily explains it was drawn to the room by a sweet scent.
Renatus finds no food nearby, but the slime insists it tracked the scent directly to her person. Sujin claims the fragrance is coming from her, leaving the girls surprised and skeptical of the claim. A quick hop sounding, Renatus jumps back and insists her scent isn't sweet, telling the slime to stay put.
Sujin continues to sniff around, ignoring her protests, while Renatus worries she is being completely ignored.
A sudden realization sounding, she remembers Theodore mentioning her scent during their encounter the previous night. Renatus wonders if she possesses a unique fragrance that only non-human creatures can perceive. She looks down pensively, trying to understand the implications of her supposed sweet scent.
A joyful shimmer sounding, Sujin is certain her scent is sweet, appearing blissful amongst blooming flowers.
A bright spark sounding, Renatus is flustered by the slime's attraction and finds the creature a bit cute.
Sujin haughtily announces that it will make Renatus its personal servant, much to her surprise.
A quick smack-sounding Chibi Renatus immediately rejects the idea, shouting that the slime isn't cute.
Sujin is outraged that she doesn't appreciate the honor, while Renatus feels purely burdened by the suggestion.
A soft sniff sounding, the slime admits it just wants to keep smelling her pleasant aroma.
In its imagination, Sujin sees itself happily frolicking with a chibi Renatus in a field of flowers.
Sujin demands she be its servant, causing Renatus to yell in frustration at the creature's persistence.
She laments the strange logic of a non-human slime, while the pink creature looks visibly flustered.
A sudden shout sounding, Sujin offers to adopt her instead, shocking the pink-haired girl once again.
Renatus kneels down, exasperated by how difficult the slime is and wondering what it truly wants.
A bright gleam sounding, the girl offers to be its friend instead, catching Sujin off guard.
With a warm smile, she promises to be a friend the slime can visit whenever it wishes.
Sujin gazes at her, deeply moved and blushing from her kind and unexpected offer of friendship. A joyful jump sounding, the slime grants her the honor of friendship, while Renatus playfully thanks it.
A quick knock sounding,
Ordi bows before a door, calling out for Sir Theodore.
Theodore stares intently as Ordi presents him with a letter sent by Renatus Gratia.
A soft rustle sounding,
Ordi explains she wrote the note right before he left the area. Both men stare at the paper with intense confusion, their faces covered in question marks.
The silence continues as they struggle to decipher the meaning behind Rayonitis's urgent message.
Theodore wonders why she would hand a letter to Ordi so urgently, his curiosity piqued by the gesture.
In her letter, Rayonitis bluntly asks Lord Theodore when his madness began and if he suffered from toothaches first.
She finishes the note by stating she needs time to prepare her heart for his reply among blooming flowers. Theodore and Ordi stare at the letter in a daze, completely caught off guard by the girl's bizarre questions.
Ordi shouts in fury at her audacity, while a stunned Theodore wonders if Rayonitis hit her head during the fall.
The men are baffled by the strange, cute emoticon the pink-haired girl drew at the end of her serious inquiry.
A chibi Rayonitis mirrors the cute emote, looking nervous yet hopeful that her message will be taken seriously.
Sujin insults her as an ugly human, leading an annoyed Rayonitis to tell the pink slime to stop teasing her.
Rayonitis winces as the bite on her arm begins to ache, wondering if the painkiller has already worn off.
Looking back at her struggle, she reflects on how much she bled and how difficult the ordeal has been.
Sujin softens its tone and asks if it hurts, surprising Rayonitis as she kneels on the luxurious mansion floor.
A gentle smile plays on her lips as her blue eyes shimmer, showing she appreciates the creature's unexpected concern. The pink-haired girl remains kneeling, her expression turning somber as she dwells on her current precarious situation.
She touches her bandaged arm, admitting that although she has endured worse, the current wound still causes her pain.
A sharp yelp sounding, Rayonitis screams in agony when Sujin suddenly leaps onto her injured arm without warning. A chibi Rayonitis clutches the slime in distress, her eyes watering from the sudden and unnecessary shock to her wound.
She squeezes the pink creature in frustration, confessing that her pain is very real, despite her earlier attempts at bravado. Stretching the slime out, she worries that Theodore's madness will force her to endure even more blood-draining encounters. Rayonitis resolves to find an alternative method for the Duke, while Sujin looks on with an expression of pure terror.
A bright spark sounding chibi Rayonitis considers the possibility of modern blood donations to avoid being bitten again.
She quickly deflates, realizing this fantasy world lacks the medical technology required for such a sophisticated procedure.
Rayonitis recalls a scene from a novel and is suddenly struck by a wave of intense self-loathing and embarrassment. Chibi Rayonitis ponders if there are any other ways to provide the bodily fluids Theodore needs to remain stable.
She blushes a deep crimson, remembering that the novel she is thinking of was rated for adults only.
A loud thud sounding, Rayonitis bangs her head on the floor in shame, questioning the sanity of the novel's writer.
Lying face down, she desperately tries to think of a more respectable way to extract the necessary fluids from herself. Sujin interrupts her thoughts by asking what she would do if someone tried to make her cry.
The pink slime bluntly declares that it would kill anyone who tried to force tears from its eyes.
A sudden realization sounding, Rayonitis wonders if tears or even sweat could serve as a substitute for her blood.
Sujin becomes even more aggressive, threatening to kill anyone who made it sweat twice for their own gain.
Rayonitis dismisses the sweat idea as Sujin bounces around, finding her line of questioning completely absurd and offensive.
She ignores the slime's protests and descends into deep thought, wondering if her own tears are the secret solution.
A bright light bulb sounding, Rayonitis decides that since Sujin's threats are empty, she should try to produce tears.
She closes her eyes and attempts to conjure up her saddest memories to force herself to cry.
A single tear falls as Rayonitis looks away, her pink hair framed by the elegant flowers in her room.
Theodore suddenly appears, standing tall and silent as he catches the girl in her moment of supposed sorrow.
A loud boom sounding,
Rhainitis is terrified by the Duke's sudden presence and wonders what he is doing there. Theodore explains the door was open, unaware that the suspect, Sujin, is hiding right behind the nearby door.
The scene shifts as Ordi reports that the girl's former home was a dilapidated shack far from civilization.
Ordi and Theodore discuss the extreme poverty Rhainitis lived in, noting the lack of even basic furniture or items.
Ordi reveals she lived with a drunk father and an older sister, information that clearly intrigues the black-haired Duke. He explains that the father was found locked alone in a room and the sister's whereabouts remain a total mystery. A quick gasp sounding, Theodore realizes the clothes he ruined were likely the most precious things the girl owned. Rhainitis clutches her chest, worried that her comment about her precious clothes has given her true feelings away. A dark aura surrounds Theodore as he feels a deep sense of guilt for destroying the girl's only belongings.
Theodore asks why she was crying, causing the chibi Rhainitis to go into a full-blown state of panic.
She struggles to come up with a believable excuse, knowing she can't admit she was trying to harvest tears. A sudden shout sounding, Rhainitis lies that she was crying because she missed her family, hoping he buys it.
From Theodore's perspective, the pink-haired girl looks fragile and genuinely heartbroken, which only intensifies his regret.
Theodore reflects on the bond between the sisters, feeling a newfound sense of empathy for the girl's tragic situation.
A heavy silence follows as Theodore looks away, clearly moved by Rhainitis' perceived grief and her difficult past.
Rhainitis is visibly shaken by Theodore's silence. Terrified, he realized she was trying to harvest her own tears.
A soft touch sounding, the Duke reaches out and gently wipes away a stray tear from her cheek.
Theodore tells her not to worry as he cradles her face, leaving the girl frozen in complete shock.
Rhainitis stares into his eyes, her single remaining tear shimmering as she processes his unexpected act of kindness. The black-haired man remains close, offering comfort while flowers bloom in the background of her confused heart. A soft blush sounding, Rhainitis looks up at him, her pulse racing as she wonders why he's being so gentle.
Theodore looks away thoughtfully, his gaze lingering on her as he contemplates the timing of his arrival.
A sudden crash sounding, Rhainitis' mind spirals into chaos, convinced his protagonist senses have caught her in a lie. Chibi Rhainitis panics over the Duke's keen instincts, debating whether she should immediately drop to her knees and beg. A sudden shout sounding, she decides to play dumb and changes the subject by asking why he's in her room.
Rhainitis forces a bright, harmless smile and clenches her fists, desperately trying to appear as innocent as possible.
Theodore stands silently as Rhainitis brings up the letter she gave to Ordi, hoping to steer the conversation away.
Theodore confirms he received the note, but admits he has a specific question regarding its strange contents.
A soft rustle sounding, he reveals the letter, making Rhainitis spiral into a fresh wave of anxiety over her writing.
Theodore points to a modern emoticon, asking for the meaning of this strange picture that appears to be laughing.
Chibi Rhainitis enthusiastically acts out the laughing emoticon, leaving the Duke completely baffled by her strange, expressive behavior. She realizes she has just witnessed a genuine look of bewilderment on the Duke's usually stoic and cold face.
Rhainitis finds his confused reaction hilarious, delighting in her small victory over the serious and formidable male lead.
Surrounded by cute bunnies, the pink-haired girl reflects on the difficulty of maintaining a smile during trying times. A bright shimmer sounding, Theodore holds out a heavy pouch of money, presenting it as a formal gift.
He explains the money is compensation for her ruined clothes, leaving Rhainitis staring at the bag in utter disbelief.
A sudden shout sounding, the girl protests the excessive amount, while Theodore notes he heard the clothes were precious.
Rhainitis stares at the pouch with wide eyes, struggling to comprehend the scale of the Duke's unexpected generosity. She calculates the value and realizes the compensation is vastly disproportionate to the simple rags she previously owned.
In her imagination, she sees a wardrobe of luxury dresses and enough funds to support her household for months.
She wonders if there's a hidden catch, picturing a greedy Theodore ready to devour her for accepting the gift.
Rhainitis tries to decline the excessive payment, insisting she hasn't done anything to deserve such a massive fortune.
A sudden boom sounding. Theodore's cool logic overwhelms her, and she gratefully accepts the money with a deep bow.
She beams with joy, resolving to save every coin to build a future happiness fund for her sister. Theodore watches her, silently wondering if it was actually appropriate for her to be crying in the first place. A joyful shimmer sounding, Rhainitis gives a radiant smile and sincerely thanks the Duke for his immense kindness.
Theodore gazes at her, his expression softening as he notes how truly beautiful her genuine smile has become.
He looks away with a slight blush, recalling how she previously compared his appearance to a cute rabbit. A bright flash sounding, a massive pile of gold Luna coins represents the incredible wealth Rhainitis has just acquired.
Rhainitis diligently studies her maid duties for 2 hours a day, determined to excel at her superficial new job.
A bright chime sounding, she realizes her new life consists mostly of eating and playing, calling it a sugar-coated job. Tucked in bed with Sujin, Rhainitis hopes this peaceful life lasts forever while feeling a twinge of guilt. She reflects on the 10 months that have passed since her arrival, her expression turning serious in the dark. Staring at the ceiling, she worries that the effects of her blood donation on the Duke might be fading. A quick sit sounding, Rhainitis wakes up and calls out for Sujin, seeking some comfort in the quiet night. The pink slime gives a blunt and immediate refusal, clearly uninterested in whatever late-night requests she has planned. Sujin teases her about her concern for Theodore, mentioning that it saw the male sleeping in his room earlier. A sudden shout sounding, Rhainitis tells the slime to stop calling the Duke that male in such a casual tone. Sujin wonders if Theodore is female, prompting Rhainitis to imagine the stoic man in a dress and protest loudly. She sternly instructs the creature to use the term man to avoid being punished by the household's strict rules. A loud boom sounding, the slime proudly declares that it will become a man slime instead, looking quite pleased. Rhainitis stares at the pink creature in silence, her face blank as she questions the slime's bizarre logic again. She watches the slime in the dark, her mind racing with thoughts of the strange companion sharing her bed. A heavy silence sounding. The girl realizes Sujin is actually male, which makes her current situation feel even more awkward. The scene shifts to the bright morning sun as the mansion's servants begin their busy daily routines. Claire, a maid with brown pigtails, cautiously approaches Rhainitis as the pink-haired girl thinks about her sister. Rhainitis is jolted awake by a loud shout, her eyes wide as she groggily asks for 10 more minutes. Sitting up abruptly in her nightgown, the startled girl stares at Claire, wondering who the unfamiliar visitor is. Surrounded by bright yellow flowers, Claire stands with her hands clasped, looking quite nervous and apologetic. The young maid introduces herself as Claire, while Rhainitis remains puzzled by the girl's frantic morning greeting. Claire urgently reports that Grand Duke Caro has returned, and all employees must immediately go out to greet him. A portrait reveals Duke Caro, the formidable head of the household, and Theodore's father, a famous figure in the Empire. Dark imagery depicts the Duke's legendary cruelty, showing the bloody aftermath of rebellions and his absolute terrifying power. Rhainitis bows her head solemnly, realizing that this dangerous and powerful man is her actual employer. As the maids line up to bow, Rhainitis wonders why such a terrifying person has arrived at the mansion. Duke Caro looms over the bowing girl, his cold gaze making Rhainitis feel as if he intends to kill her.
A close-up of the Duke's intense purple eye reveals a sharp, calculating expression that sends chills down the girl's spine. Sweating and terrified, Rhainitis remains bowed low, desperately wondering what she could have possibly done to earn his ire.
Chibi Rhainitis panics over her late arrival, though she takes small comfort in having managed to calm Theodore down earlier. The black-haired Duke remains silent, his stoic face betraying nothing as he continues to stare at the pink-haired girl.
A mysterious thought echoes in the void, questioning if the girl standing before the Duke could be the enchantress. Rhainitis' blue eyes are wide with sheer terror as she feels the weight of the Duke's oppressive presence. A sudden gasp sounding, the Duke abruptly walks past the group, leaving a stunned and shaken Rhainitis in his wake. Theodore's father moves away with a cold, distant expression, his silent departure doing little to ease the tense atmosphere. Still trembling, Rhainitis looks back in confusion, her mind racing as she processes the intense moment that just occurred. Claire frantically whispers for her not to raise her head, while the pink-haired girl remains utterly bewildered by the situation. Claire warns that Orty will surely scold her later, prompting a dejected Rhainitis to offer a soft, quiet apology. Chibi Claire is visibly shaken by the encounter, while Rhainitis reflects on how genuinely surprising the Duke's behavior was. Rhainitis shudders, recalling the Duke's cold tone and a gaze that seemed to treat everyone as mere objects. Clenching her hands tightly, the girl resolves that Duke Caro is someone she never wants to face ever again. Rita, Theodore's nanny, enters the scene holding a tea tray, her expression serious as she performs her duties. Rita sternly warns Rhainitis that from now on she must take full responsibility for any mistakes she makes. After learning to brew tea, Rhainitis prepares a cup for Theodore, while Rita watches the pink slime bounce nearby. Standing before the master's door, the two women are met with a blunt command to go away. Rhainitis beams with joy when Theodore refuses the tea, celebrating the return of her easy, sugar-coated job. A soft sigh sounding, Rita looks troubled by the rejection as she quietly accepts Theodore's cold dismissal. The nanny decides they should return tomorrow, and a relieved Rhainitis eagerly agrees to leave the hallway. A rhythmic step sounding, the two women walk away from the door, their silhouettes fading into the bright corridor. Despite her relief, Rhainitis cannot help but wonder what has caused Theodore to be in such a foul mood. A sudden worry sounding, she fears he might be suffering a relapse of madness, which would be a major problem. A weary sigh sounding, Rita decides it is time to reveal the truth behind Theodore's current state of distress. Looking at the elegant tea set, Rita explains that Theodore's sour mood is entirely due to his father's return. She reveals the deep animosity between Theodore and Duke Caro, leaving Rhainitis to ponder their fractured family bond. Rhainitis finds the strained relationship between the nobles odd, her blue eyes reflecting her growing curiosity and concern. Rita sadly admits her own relationship with her father is poor, causing a moment of shared, heavy silence. Sensing the somber atmosphere, Chibi Rhainitis wonders if there is a deeper, more tragic backstory at play here. To lighten the mood, Rhainitis cheers that she at least has a kind sister, making Rita look slightly confused. A sudden flinch sounding, Rita reacts sharply when the girl asks if Theodore has any other living family members. Rhainitis is taken aback by the nanny's sudden intensity, wondering why such a simple question caused such a reaction. The scene shifts to a top-down view of Theodore resting alone on a sofa in a grand, sunlit room. Theodore lies with his eyes closed, his face etched with a weariness that suggests a deeply troubled mind. Dark memories haunt his sleep as a shadowy figure screams cruel words, calling him a monster and wishing death. The black-haired man remains still, the weight of his traumatic past seemingly pressing down on him, even in rest. Alone in the silent room, Theodore is a solitary figure surrounded by luxury that offers him no real comfort.
Rhinitis reflects on the novel's lack of detail regarding Theodore's mother, suspecting their relationship was far from peaceful. Rita advises Rhinitis to avoid sensitive family topics around Theodore, and the pink-haired girl obediently agrees to the request. As they walk, Rita notes the intense pressure between father and son, while Rhinitis reflects on the mansion's heavy atmosphere.
Rhinitis recalls her own difficult father, wondering if the solitary black-haired duke truly has no family he can rely on. Standing in the sunlit corridor, the girl looks away with a troubled expression, unable to shake her curiosity about Theodore.
Rhinitis ponders why she continues to feel so much concern for the Duke as she wanders through the grand manor.
Theodore lies exhausted on a sofa, silently wishing for a tea that could actually provide him with some genuine comfort.
The scene shifts to the bright, verdant garden where sunlight filters through the lush green leaves of the massive trees.
A joyful shout sounding, Chibi Rhinitis throws her arms up and cheers, "Yay!" now that her maid duties are finished.
Following Sujin's advice, Rhinitis finds a cool, peaceful spot in the grass while the pink slime demands its well-earned praise.
She lies back with a content smile, wondering how her slime companion managed to find such a perfect, secluded retreat.
A gentle rustle sounding, Rhinitis relaxes under the massive tree, appreciating the soft grass and the refreshing natural shade.
Closing her eyes, the girl feels that this tranquil environment is the ideal place to drift off into pleasant dreams.
A soft snooze sounding, Rhinitis falls into a peaceful sleep as the dappled sunlight dances across her serene, resting face.
A sudden shout sounding, Rhinitis is jolted awake by a loud counting that leaves her wide-eyed and completely startled.
A sudden thumping sounding, the girl sits up quickly and clutches her racing heart as the rhythmic counting continues nearby.
A sudden rustle sounding, Rhinitis peeks from behind a large tree trunk to investigate the source of the loud noise.
She spots a shirtless man with red hair swinging a sword with intense focus, his powerful movements cutting the air. The knight grips his blade firmly, finishing his training set with a final count while sweat glints on his skin.
Rhinitis's blue eyes widen in shock as he recognizes the man, her face flushing with unexpected surprise and mounting confusion.
A sharp gasp sounding, Chibi Rhinitis recoils in shock after stumbling upon the knight's private and very intense training session. She watches the red-haired man continue his workout, questioning why he would be practicing in such a remote forest clearing.
Peeking through the leaves, Rhinitis realizes the man is undeniably a significant character from the original story she once read. A sudden boom sounding, she identifies him as Instrud Glaucus, the powerful knight who famously carried Theodore in the past.
Still hidden, Rhinitis wonders why the Duke's bodyguard is training alone in such a distant part of the mansion grounds. Deciding there is no reason to confront him, she resolves to quietly retreat and head back to the manor house. Despite her decision to leave, Rhinitis cannot help but admire the knight's impressive muscles, finding them quite distracting and impressive.
Chibi Rhinitis playfully critiques his appearance, wishing the red-haired man were just a few centimeters taller to suit her taste.
She notes that while handsome, he lacks Theodore's unique beauty, though his striking red hair and blue eyes are noteworthy.
A sudden stop sounding, Rhinitis freezes as the significance of his appearance and his role in the novel finally clicks. A rhythmic step sounding, a pair of sturdy boots approaches through the grass, signaling that her presence has been discovered.
Instrud stands over the girl, his expression suspicious as he asks what the enchantress is doing here all alone.
Caught off guard, Rhinitis stammers in surprise while looking up at the formidable red-haired knight standing directly before her.
Instrud looks down with a stern, questioning gaze as he begins to put on his shirt, his presence feeling oppressive. Narrative text reveals Instrud was the tragic character who fell for Estella and tried to help her escape the mansion.
The memory explains how his failed attempt to save the original heroine led to his own unfortunate and tragic end.
Instrid asks how she knows his name, while Rhainitis remains silent, desperately trying to find a believable, safe response.
She lies that Ordi mentioned him, while the red-haired knight remains skeptical, questioning if she is being entirely truthful.
A sudden spark sounding, Chibi Rhainitis notes his murderous glare, remembering him as a character she once liked for his loyalty.
She recalls that in the novel, Instrud never believed the enchantress could actually calm Theodore's terrifying and deep-seated madness.
Memories of Estella's influence on Theodore resurface, highlighting Instrid's deep distrust of the enchantress and her supposedly magical powers.
Chibi Rhainitis realizes he considers her untrustworthy, making his cold gaze feel even more intense as they face each other.
A sudden fuming-sounding Chibi Rhainitis gets angry thinking about her dungeon suffering compared to his past help for Estella.
A low growl sounding, she feels indignant as Instrud demands to know why an enchantress like her was hiding.
A quick chime sounding, Rhainitis claims she was only napping, but the knight dismissively says he already understands her motives.
A heavy thud sounding, Instrud bluntly states he is not interested in kids like her, leaving Rhainitis momentarily stunned.
A weary sigh sounding, Chibi Rhainitis is outraged by his arrogance, loudly protesting that she has no feelings for him. A sudden squeeze sounding, she insists she also lacks interest, despite knowing he only has eyes for the heroine, Estella. A quick swoosh sounding, Rhainitis lists her requirements, claiming he needs to be much taller to ever catch her eye. A bright shimmer sounding, she demands even more muscle mass, imagining a giant man to prove her total lack of attraction. A confident snap sounding, Rhainitis strikes a defiant pose and asserts that her high standards are the absolute minimum for her.
Instrid looks completely floored by the girl's critique, his expression etched with a sense of utter defeat.
A rhythmic thumping sounding, the red-haired knight collapses in despair, while Rhainitis cheerily walks away from him.
A sudden shout sounding, the knight reaches out desperately, begging the pink-haired girl to wait a moment.
A dark shadow looms over the girl as a cruel, disembodied voice curses her name in her mind.
Rhainitis freezes in terror as a tall man with black hair raises a hand as if to strike her.
Rhainitis cowers in fear, begging for mercy while the red-haired knight reaches out to steady her.
A sharp gasp sounding, the girl remains paralyzed by the sudden, traumatic memory of her father's past cruelty.
Rhainitis apologizes for her reaction, explaining that she was startled by a memory of being hit by her father. Instrud turns away with a somber expression, his silence hanging heavy in the air as he listens to her. A gentle rustle sounding, the knight kindly reaches out to remove a stray leaf stuck in the girl's hair. Looking pensive, Instrud seems troubled as he reflects on their intense interaction amidst the blooming roses.
Rhainitis looks on in surprise, her blue eyes wide as she tries to understand the stoic knight's thoughts.
Awkwardly, Instrud tries to offer comfort by straightening her ribbon, while the girl remains completely baffled by him. A rhythmic step sounding, Rhainitis walks back toward the manor, leaving the lush greenery of the forest behind. Watching her depart, Instrud considers asking the enchantress if she knows other treatments to help Lord Theodore. Memories of Theodore's past madness haunt Instrud, making him question if the girl's supposedly magical powers are real. The knight looks deeply troubled as he remembers seeing the Duke's terrifying transformation behind a heavy cell door. Clenching his fist, Instrud wonders if Rhainitis can truly provide the relief that the suffering Theodore desperately needs. Turning back, Rhainitis is surprised when the red-haired knight calls out to her one last time with a request. Chibi Instrud looks utterly shocked, while Chibi Rhainitis identifies herself with a confident thumbs-up gesture.
Rhainitis acknowledges their roles, noting they will see each other often despite his earlier hostility and name-calling.
Smiling radiantly, the girl properly introduces herself as Renatus Gratia, while surrounded by a field of blooming flowers.
Instrid blushes and looks away, clearly caught off guard by the girl's sudden kindness and bright introduction.
Sunlight glints off an elegant tea set, signaling the start of her solo-made duties for the Duke.
A sudden thumping sounding. Rhainitis panics while clutching the tea tray, debating a desperate plan to save him. A weary sigh sounding. She wonders if using her own saliva in the tea is the only solution.
Recalling Rita's training, Rhainitis resolves to secretly use her bodily fluids to prevent Theodore from becoming a monster.
Walking toward the study, she justifies her plan by comparing it to the novel's romantic scenes between the leads. A heavy thud sounding. Rhainitis slumps against the master's door, fighting her sense of overwhelming guilt.
With her eyes shut tight, she tries to convince herself that this questionable act is for the Duke's benefit.
Driven by a frantic logic, she tells herself that ignorance is bliss for his safety and her survival. A sudden click sounding. Rhainitis opens the teapot lid, steeling her nerves to finally carry out the task. Theodore stands before her, catching her off guard while she is holding the saliva in her mouth. A sudden gulp sounding. Chibi Rhainitis cowers as the confused black-haired man questions her odd behavior at the door. A rhythmic step sounding. Rhainitis carefully approaches the table with the golden tea tray, trying to act natural.
Theodore sits absorbed in a book while the pink-haired girl prepares to serve the afternoon tea, as instructed.
Rhainitis watches him closely, her blue eyes scanning his features for any sign of his impending madness or relapse.
She notes his calm purple eyes, relieved that he seems composed and entirely in control of his mental state.
Observing his neat appearance and steady hands, she finds no indication that he is losing his fragile sanity. Surrounding blue roses emphasize the peaceful atmosphere as she monitors his stable condition with a careful gaze.
Despite her failed plan, Renatus feels relieved that Theodore is acting like his usual, sophisticated self today.
She wonders if the Duke's intense focus on reading is a sign that he will remain fine for now.
Rhainitis looks curiously at his book, admitting to herself that she does not quite understand the appeal of poetry. A moment of quiet confusion passes as she stands by with the teapot, watching him read intently.
The girl questions why his poetry book is so long, considering most poems are usually quite short. Theodore speaks suddenly, sensing that her gaze has been fixed on him for a long period of time.
Looking up from his book, the black-haired man pins her with an intense, questioning stare from his chair. A sudden flinch sounding. Rhainitis is startled by his direct attention and his sudden, unexpected question.
Theodore asks if she likes books, while Rhainitis panics, wondering how long he has been watching her.
Rhainitis tries to hide her embarrassment, secretly thinking she was only watching him for symptoms, not the book.
Theodore simply denies liking books, hiding his true thoughts behind a calm, black-haired facade, as Rhainitis watches.
Chibi Rhainitis explains that books are boring and make her sleepy, leaving the black-haired man momentarily confused.
As tea pours, Rhainitis reflects on her past life's reading habits and the poverty that prevents them now.
Theodore is visibly taken aback by her blunt admission, finding her total lack of interest in literature quite shocking.
Holding his red book, the black-haired man asks what she actually enjoys if reading is not her hobby. Caught off guard by his persistent questioning, Chibi Rhainitis wonders why the Duke is suddenly so talkative today.
The girl thinks of her sister Estella, but knows she needs a more conventional hobby to tell him.
While she imagines normal hobbies, Chibi Rhainitis remembers her real past of labor and carrying heavy, dusty sacks. Suddenly, Rhainitis declares with great passion that she absolutely loves eating delicious food above anything else in life.
Chibi Theodore looks skeptical, but Rhainitis insists that the mansion's amazing food is the best part of living there.
She excitedly describes her first time eating lamb steak, her blue eyes sparkling at the memory of the meal.
Rheonitis raves about grilled fish, prompting the Duke to dryly note that she ate that only 2 days ago.
Theodore inwardly questions if eating can truly be considered a hobby, though he finds her enthusiasm quite amusing. A rare, small smile touches the Duke's lips as he admits that no one would dislike eating good food.
Rheonitis is stunned to see him laugh, while Theodore jokingly refers to himself as a fellow gourmet in response. A quick tap sounding, Theodore motions for her to sit while asking about other recent culinary discoveries she enjoyed.
Surprised by the invitation, Rheinitis carefully takes a seat on the ornate sofa to continue their rare, friendly conversation.
Chibi Rheinatis mentions seeing pudding for the first time, making Chibi Theodore curious to know if it tasted good. She explains that she only saw it from afar, as the servants have a strict hierarchy for such treats.
Theodore rests his hand on his red book, listening intently to her explanation of the mansion's internal social rules.
Surrounded by pale roses, the Duke looks pensive as he considers the girl's humble and honest perspective on life. Renatus mentions a delicious chicken dish, but Theodore looks surprised by her misidentification of the high-quality meal.
A sudden thud sounding. Chibi Rheinatis is horrified when the Duke explains that she actually ate expensive pheasant yesterday.
A sudden shout sounding, the pink-haired girl panics over the luxury of her meal, while Theodore remains perfectly calm.
Rheonitis realizes with awe that the world is full of exotic and interesting dishes she has yet to taste.
Theodore mentions that some humans even eat poisonous things, but Rheinitis finds she is no longer afraid of him.
The pair sits together in the sun-drenched room, sharing a surprisingly peaceful moment amidst the blooming white roses.
Later, alone by the window, Theodore stands in the cool blue light, his earlier composure beginning to slowly fade. The memory of Rheinitis's bright declaration about food lingers, bringing a faint, genuine smile to the Duke's face.
A sharp throb sounding, Theodore's eyes glow a menacing purple as he struggles against another wave of impending madness.
A rhythmic knock sounding, Ordi arrives at the door, interrupting the Duke's private struggle with his terrifying condition.
The brown-haired servant announces his presence, unaware that Lord Theodore is currently fighting a battle for his sanity.
Gripping his head, the Duke braces himself as the servant mentions having an urgent message for him tonight. A close-up reveals Theodore's intense, pained gaze as he desperately tries to suppress the dark transformation within his mind.
Exhaling slowly, the Duke tells him to enter, dismissively ignoring Ordi's concerned question about his sudden, unwell appearance.
Ordi reveals that the daughter of Count Pablo will visit tomorrow, news that visibly shocks the weary Duke.
The servant explains the schedule planned by the Grand Duchess, leaving Theodore feeling like a puppet once again.
Theodore looks down, realizing his mother is behind this visit, further complicating his already fragile and exhausted state.
Narrative text reveals the blonde lady is a potential betrothal candidate, chosen only to secure his family's position.
Surrounded by tea and roses, Theodore reflects on his mother's cold, meticulous planning for his unwanted future marriage.
He bitterly notes that his mother wishes for his death, while simultaneously using him as a meticulous political tool.
Removing his vest, Theodore sarcastically suggests guiding the ladies straight to his bedroom to satisfy his mother's greed. A sudden startle sounding. Ordi is appalled as the Duke scoffs at being treated like a well-bred stallion.
Theodore mockingly asks if Ordi would rather sit and have tea with the noble lady in his place.
The flustered servant stammers in response, while the black-haired Duke remains crossed-armed and deeply cynical.
A heavy silence falls over the blue room as Theodore turns away, his expression dark and filled with resentment.
He coldly orders Ordi to prepare for the visit as instructed, ending their tense and uncomfortable nighttime interaction. A quick click sounding, Ordi leaves the room, leaving Theodore alone with his dark thoughts and heavy burdens. Theodore realizes that to his mother, he is merely a valuable doll to be sold for her status.
Haunting memories of his parents in chains resurface,
reminding him of his father's even deeper cruelty and hatred.
Theodore looks down somberly, his thoughts consumed by the troublesome matters of a funeral or succession.
A haunting vision of a body lying in a pool of blood emphasizes the dark history weighing on him.
Young Theodore watches in terror, his purple eyes welling with tears as he witnesses the gruesome aftermath. A sudden wince sounding, the Duke's pained expression reveals the enduring trauma that continues to haunt his adult life.
Gripping his sleeve, Theodore bitterly reflects that his only reason for living is his inability to die. A sudden shout sounding, Chibi Renatitas screams in a panic as her thoughts shift to her current predicament. In her room, Rhainitis argues with the pink slime Sujin about the safety of eating prepared poisonous food.
The girl passionately insists that wild monsters should eat crickets and drink muddy water to survive.
Sujin bounces in anger while Rhainitis jokingly refers to it as a great high-ranking demon slime. A sudden thud sounding, Sujin sulks and turns away as the pink-haired girl questions why the slime is pouting.
Tucking herself into bed, Rhainitis cheerfully decides to sleep, leaving the disgruntled slime to its own devices. She admits to Sujin that the Duke was actually amazing today, contradicting her earlier fears about him.
Reflecting on the novel, she realizes Theodore is a completely different person from the scary, obsessive male lead described.
Rhainitis drifts towards sleep, thinking that perhaps not all nobles are uncomfortable to be around after all.
The following day, the blonde lady of Count Pablo laughs radiantly while complimenting the aroma of the tea. Theodore responds with a cold, curt reply, showing little interest in the noble lady's polite conversation.
The lady apologizes for her remark, while a nervous Rhainitis prepares to pour more tea for the pair. Chibi Rhainitis trembles with stress, finding the stifling atmosphere between the Duke and the lady incredibly uncomfortable.
She feels like a helpless shrimp caught between whales, while Theodore remains dismissive of the lady's clear flirting.
Looking closely, Rhainitis notes the lady's aristocratic elegance and the beauty of her shimmering blonde hair.
The girl thinks the lady's delicate aura resembles her sister Estella, raising her standards for beauty.
As the blonde lady gossips about expensive flowers, Rhainitis realizes her personality is nothing like her sister's.
Rhainitis hopes to serve the tea and leave quickly, but she is suddenly halted by a strange sight.
A sharp scratch sounding, she notices Theodore's hand trembling violently against the white tablecloth as he sits.
The pink-haired maid watches him with growing concern, realizing that something is deeply wrong with his state.
She knows Theodore isn't the type to tremble before a lady, even one as beautiful as the visitor.
Rhainitis grimly thinks that if he truly liked the woman, he would be more likely to imprison her. Horror strikes as she sees Theodore's eyes glowing red, signaling a terrifying and sudden relapse into his madness.
As the blonde lady laughs obliviously, Rhainitis panics, fearing the Duke's madness will manifest right then.
A sudden shout sounding, Rhainitis calls out to the lady, desperately trying to intervene before a disaster occurs.
The pink-haired girl abruptly tells the stunned blonde visitor that today is not a good day for tea.
Surrounding blue flowers emphasize the tense moment as the lady looks on in utter confusion at the maid's interruption.
A sudden flinch sounding, Rhainitis stands her ground, despite her fear of the social consequences of her actions.
She understands the strict social hierarchy, but decides that saving the Duke is more important than protocol.
Rhainitis ignores the lady's stunned silence, telling herself that this is a truly necessary time to speak up.
A sudden smile sounding, the blonde lady closes her eyes, maintaining her graceful facade despite the awkward situation.
Chibi Rhainitis looks confused, wondering how the visitor will react to her blunt and rude demand.
The lady suggests Theodore send the maid away, prompting a gasp of horror from the panicked pink-haired girl. Rhainitis lunges forward, shouting that Theodore isn't feeling well to prevent him from being left alone.
She frantically blocks the lady's view, insisting that she should leave and visit at another time.
Rhinitis urges her to depart immediately before Theodore loses consciousness and his dark transformation is fully revealed.
She gestures wildly, repeating that the Duke is too unwell to even respond to the lady's presence.
The blonde lady eventually yields, closing her eyes and promising to return for another visit next time. A relieved sigh sounding, Renatus watches as the visitor finally stands up to leave the room.
A rhythmic step sounding. The lady glances back one last time as she departs, leaving the room tense.
Turning her focus back to the Duke, Renatus calls out his name with a look of extreme urgency.
Theodore groans in pain while Rhinitis decides that she must get her fluids into him immediately.
A sudden flush sounding, she resolves to spit in the tea as a desperate last resort to save him.
Rhinitis is caught off guard as Theodore suddenly looms over her with an intense, predatory gaze. A sharp gulp sounding, she braces for impact. Certain that the Duke is about to bite her. Renatus clenches her eyes shut, her face flushed as she experiences a moment of overwhelming distress and anticipation. Her eyes snap open in confusion as she looks around, wondering what just happened in the quiet room. A sudden pull sounding, Theodore leans his weight against Rhinitis, his head slumped as his strength begins to fail.
Theodore huffs and pants breathlessly against the pink-haired girl, who catches him with a startled, wide-eyed expression.
Amidst dark roses, Theodore struggles desperately against a cursed madness that threatens to completely overtake his mind and body. Renatus watches him with a worried gaze, noting that he is wearing that terrifyingly pained expression once again. Gasping for air, the black-haired Duke's eyes glow a fierce red as the feverish transformation continues to consume him. Driven by desperation, Rhinitis pulls Theodore into a deep kiss, surrounded by a sudden flurry of pink rose petals. Theodore's red eyes widen in shock as the girl gently cups his face, her touch grounding him amidst the chaos. The pink-haired maid stands still, her back to the viewer as she processes the weight of her impulsive actions.
Rhinitis's head spins as she panics over her lack of experience, recalling romantic scenes from her past life's novels.
A sharp gasp sounding, her eyes widen as she notices a familiar pattern emerging in this intense, unexpected moment. Looking down at the Duke, Rhinitis wonders if this intimate scenario is actually a scene from the novel she read. In her chibi form, she begrudgingly thanks her past self's taste in books while nervously planning her next move. The pair shares a passionate kiss as Rhinitis follows the book's instructions, her lips naturally parting for the Duke. A soft shuffle sounding, their feet remain close while Rhinitis thinks of the kiss as a calculated, necessary intrusion. She notices Theodore's small fangs and thinks they make him look more like a cute puppy than a monster. Leaning in deeper, the pink-haired girl finds the Duke's vulnerability surprisingly adorable amidst the romantic, rose-filled atmosphere. A sudden gasp sounding, Rhinitis shakes her head, realizing she shouldn't be distracted by cute thoughts during a crisis. Theodore suddenly pulls her back, his intense red gaze locked onto hers as he takes control of the interaction. Rhinitis panics as she realizes Theodore's eyes are still glowing, signaling that his madness hasn't fully subsided yet. A sharp breath sounding, Theodore kisses her again with renewed intensity, burying his face against hers amidst blooming flowers. Rhinitis struggles to catch her breath, but Theodore pulls her back into another deep, muffled embrace that silences her protests. A sudden clatter sounding, a teacup tips over on the table, spilling red liquid as the room remains tense.
Rhinitis tells herself this act is purely for treatment, sharing her fluids only to heal the Duke's dangerous madness.
Theodore firmly grips her hand, grounding them both while the girl insists to herself that there is no other meaning. She resolves that despite the awkwardness, this intimate connection is a necessary sacrifice to save the Duke from himself. Rhinitis stands alone and flushed, her eyes wide with shock as the reality of the encounter finally sinks in. Chibi Renatus frantically complains to Sujin about her swollen lips, wondering if her mouth is actually broken from the biting. Sobbing loudly, she explains the Duke's aggressive tasting while the pink slime watches with a skeptical and unimpressed expression. Narrative text reveals Theodore fainted afterward, leaving Orty to carry him away while a grumpy Rheonitis retreats to her room. A sudden thud sounding, Renatus jumps in surprise with Sujin on her head as a voice calls out to her. Looking back at the room, the pink-haired girl wonders if such a temperament is truly necessary for regaining consciousness. Close-up of Rheonitis' focused gaze as she reflects on the lingering intensity of the Duke's sudden and deep transformation. Theodore stands in a daze, his purple eyes wide and his face flushed as he touches his own lips. A soft touch sounding, Rheonitis gazes downward, her hand reaching up to touch her still tingling mouth in the quiet room. She blushes deeply, realizing that her lips are still numb from the Duke's overwhelming and passionate attention yesterday. A sharp crash sounding, a teacup shatters on the floor as the scene shifts to the angry visitor's room. The blonde lady of Count Pablo fumes with rage, standing over the broken porcelain in her elegantly decorated room. Her face turns a bright red as she vows to never forgive the maid for insulting her earlier.
A rhythmic chirp sounding. Birds fly over the grand mansion as a new, sunny day begins over the estate.
Rheonitis sleeps soundly in her large, sun-drenched bed, cuddling the pink slime Sujin under the warm white blankets.
Her eyes snap open with a sudden realization as the morning light fills the room through the yellow curtains. A sudden startle sounding, Rheonitis bolts upright in bed, her expression full of panic as she checks the time. Desperate to see if Theodore is okay, the pink-haired girl jumps out of bed and dashes toward the door. A quick rustle sounding, Rheonitis hurriedly dresses herself in her maid uniform while Sujin watches her frantic morning routine. Sujin pouts and demands breakfast, but the girl ignores the slime's hunger in her haste to reach the Duke. A rhythmic dash sounding, Rheonitis runs through the mansion's halls, determined to check on Theodore's condition with her own eyes. Offered a sharp greeting, Rheonitis is interrupted as she plans to find Orty first to check on the Duke. Looking back with a startled and curious expression, Rheonitis wonders who this stranger is and what she wants today. A sudden startle sounding, Rheonitis is blindsided when Elsa informs her that someone is waiting in the mansion's backyard. Elsa turns away with a cryptic look, claiming she is unsure of the mysterious visitor's identity today. The brown-haired maid urges Rheonitis to hurry, while the pink-haired girl looks on with an expression of deep confusion. A rhythmic dash sounding, Elsa hurries away, leaving a wary Rheonitis standing alone in the grand sunlit hallway. A soft sigh sounding, Rheonitis thinks about how people avoid her, wondering if her reputation is causing this isolation. The scene shifts to the mansion's lush backyard, filled with vibrant greenery and delicate blooming white roses. Rheonitis wanders through the vast garden, questioning who would possibly know she is staying at the mansion right now. In her chibi form, she panics, fearing the visitor believes the wild rumors about her being a dangerous enchantress. Her imagination spirals as she dreads being asked for love potions, or even worse, being asked to cast curses. A sudden lunge sounding, Elsa reappears and violently grabs Rheonitis by her long pink hair from behind. Rheonitis gasps in shock as she is forced to the ground, staring up at her attacker's cold and shadowed expression. Shadowed by malice, Elsa looks down with a sneer, questioning the maid's supposed status and her place here. A sharp grip sounding, Elsa pins the girl's arm behind her back, attempting to force her into painful submission. A sudden heave sounding, Rheonitis uses her unexpected physical strength to throw the aggressive brown-haired maid off her. A determined scowl sounding, Chibi Rheonitis is highlighted for her specialty, which is her incredible and raw physical power. A loud crash sounding,
Elsa is sent tumbling into the bushes as the blonde visitor watches the chaos unfold.
The blonde noblewoman looks on with deep irritation, clearly displeased by the lack of order in the mansion's garden.
Elsa frantically apologizes while Rhainitis realizes that the voice belongs to the high-ranking visitor she encountered earlier. Standing elegantly with her parasol, Lady Pablo complains about the harsh sun and the inconvenient interruption of her peace.
The noblewoman fumes with rage, demanding how a mere maid like Rhainitis dared to throw her out previously. With a chilling smile, Lady Pablo cruelly asks Rhainitis how she should be killed to satisfy her lingering anger.
Rhainitis stammers an explanation, insisting she didn't intend to be rude, but had a truly urgent matter arise. Lady Pablo yells that a common maid has no right to insult her, especially in front of Lord Theodore. Rhainitis struggles internally, realizing she cannot explain the truth without revealing the Duke's secret and dangerous condition. A heavy thud sounding, Lady Pablo orders Rhainitis to remain on the ground and silent without her explicit permission. The blonde lady sneers with contempt, telling the pink-haired girl to stay down on the dirty garden ground. Rhainitis clenches her fist in the dirt, realizing the noblewoman is simply using her to vent her own frustrations. She recalls the terrifying image of the Duke suffering from his madness, fueling her desperate need for absolute silence. Elsa moves in for another attack as Rhainitis stays still, accepting the social hierarchy's cruel and unfair reality. Looking down with a pained gaze, Rhainitis braces herself for the inevitable blow from the angry and vengeful maid. A sharp sting sounding, a red screen emphasizes the demand for the pink-haired girl to beg for forgiveness. Rhainitis is struck across the face, her head snapping to the side from the sheer force of the slap. Submitting to the abuse, the pink-haired maid bows her head and offers a quiet, forced apology for her actions. Lady Pablo watches with a cold, unmoved expression, her eyes showing no hint of mercy or genuine satisfaction. A quiet pause sounding, Rhainitis wonders if the noblewoman will ever be satisfied with her display of suffering. Touching her bruised cheek, Rhainitis recalls the trauma of being hit by her father in her previous life. A soft breeze sounding, Lady Pablo demands to know why the girl has stopped her desperate apologies so soon. Elsa prepares to strike the girl once more, but her hand is suddenly intercepted by a powerful newcomer. A tight squeeze sounding, Rhainitis clenches her eyes shut, bracing for a hit that never actually arrives. A cautious peek sounding, her eyes snap open in confusion as she realizes she was spared from the blow. A tall, red-haired man holds Elsa's arm firmly, preventing her from striking the kneeling maid a second time. Rhainitis looks up in utter shock, her face flushed and bruised as she sees her unexpected and stoic savior. The red-haired man glares at Elsa with a stern, authoritative look, radiating an aura of disciplined and dangerous power. Elsa stammers in surprise, identifying the man as Instrud, while he questions the reason for this garden violence. A sudden block sounding, Elsa orders the intruder to leave immediately, despite his clearly superior and intimidating presence. Lady Pablo's maid demands to know how he dares give orders, citing the high status of her young lady. A soft breeze sounding, Lady Pablo maintains her icy, detached stare, watching the knight intervene in her personal business. The red-haired man looks on with cold indifference, simply offering a hollow apology for the sudden interruption. He bluntly states that he only cares about combat, showing zero respect for the lady's noble and arrogant standing. A formal bow sounding, Instrud introduces himself as Instrud de Glaucis, the Duke's personal and fiercely loyal knight. Camilla maintains her noble poise, questioning Instrud's status while secretly acknowledging his high-born knightly aura. A soft smile sounding, the blonde noblewoman wears a cryptic and unnerving expression. Formally introducing herself, Camilla de Pablo laughs with a performative and condescending grace amidst the garden.
Camilla boasts of her recent tea with Theodore, leaving the onlookers bewildered by her sudden social claims.
Renatus fumes internally, finding the blonde's sudden shift in temperament toward Instrude to be incredibly pretentious.
Camilla sighs dramatically, bringing up an alleged incident from yesterday's tea time to justify her current aggression.
The blonde lady claims she was merely disciplining the maid, while Instrude observes the tense confrontation.
Terrified, Renatus pleads her innocence, insisting she never intended to cause any trouble for the visitors. A weary sigh sounding, Instrude closes his eyes, seemingly exhausted by the noblewoman's endless social posturing. Renatus reflects on her true motives, knowing she only acted to protect everyone from the Duke's madness. She feels a wave of loneliness, wishing Estella Uni were there to offer her silent, unwavering support. A fleeting memory of a joyful girl amidst flowers highlights the painful contrast with Renatus's current struggles.
Stealing her resolve, the pink-haired maid decides she must endure this trial alone without any outside help.
Her attention is caught by a sudden realization as she gazes upward with wide, startled eyes. Kneeling beside her, Instrude explains that Lord Theodore deeply values the loyalty of those close to him.
He advises Renatus that understanding Theodore's character is vital if she wishes to remain by his side.
Camilla scoffs at the suggestion, questioning if a lowly maid could ever truly belong to Theodore's circle.
A quiet pause sounding, Renatus stares in shock as the red-haired knight reaches out to her.
A soft whisper sounding, Instrude commandingly offers his hand, urging the girl to rise from the ground.
Confused, Renatus wonders why a man of his high standing would offer such a gesture to her. A sudden flush sounding, the pink-haired girl is overwhelmed with embarrassment as she is pulled toward him. Instrude cryptically hints that Renatus possesses a significance far beyond her current role as a mansion maid.
He warns Camilla that she will understand his words once Renatus is officially part of Theodore's household.
Camilla is left speechless and enraged by the knight's bold defense of a common servant.
Elsa warns of the political consequences, while Camilla's face darkens with an intense and growing fury.
Shaking with fear, the pink slime Sujin clings to a tiny Instrude, while the background fills with panic.
Renatus looks up at her savior, still struggling to process the knight's sudden and intense protective streak.
Narrative text reveals Renatus cannot understand why Instrude is going to such extreme lengths to protect her.
Narrative text explains that a noble's public support is a sharp and painful insult to Lady Pablo's pride.
Touching her chin, Renatus feels a strange sense of reassurance despite the chaotic and violent garden encounter.
A sharp snap sounding, Camilla grips her parasol with white-knuckled rage, unable to contain her mounting humiliation.
Fuming, Camilla vows to settle this matter with Theodore directly before turning to leave the garden.
The noblewoman departs in a huff, leaving the garden in an eerie silence after her dramatic exit.
Shrouded in cold blue light, Camilla walks away while Instrude continues to hold the startled maid close.
Renatus panics, worrying that Instrude's words have only served to provoke the powerful house of Pablo even more. A sudden startle sounding, Instrude grabs Renatus by the shoulders, his expression intense and full of urgent concern. He squishes her cheeks, checking for injuries, while Renatus insists she is fine despite her obvious facial bruises.
Instrude points out her cracked lips and scraped palms, insisting that they must go treat her wounds immediately.
A rhythmic dash sounding, the red-haired knight pulls Renatus along as they run through the sunlit mansion garden.
Instrude leads the way with a determined gait, his focus entirely on getting the injured girl to safety.
Renatus gazes at him in wonder, a soft gasp escaping her as she follows the knight's lead. Narrative text muses on the feeling of falling for a sweet and supportive secondary character in a story. Hand in hand, the pair runs toward the mansion, surrounded by the beauty of blooming white and pink flowers. A rhythmic tap sounding, Theodore walks through a grand, empty hallway, his silhouette
cast long against the tiles. Theodore reflects on his hazy memories of madness, wondering why his recent encounter with Rhinitis feels so clear.
A pained groan sounding, Theodore leans against a wall, his face pale as he searches for the pink-haired girl.
Doubled over, he wonders if he can endure the lingering effects of the curse while desperately needing to talk. Theodore pauses as he hears a voice, his purple eyes widening in shock as he recognizes the familiar tone.
A soft gasp sounding, Theodore's gaze intensifies as the words of an unknown speaker reach his sensitive ears.
A sudden door slamming sounding, the Duke bursts into the room, his expression one of pure and unadulterated shock. Instrid sits beside Rhinitis on the couch, gently tending to her facial wounds while Lord Theodore watches from the doorway. A sudden startle sounding, Rhinitis looks up in wide-eyed shock as she recognizes the Duke standing silently at the entrance. Lord Theodore asks if she is all right, while Instrud's hand is seen carefully applying healing ointment to her bruised face. A sudden flush sounding, Theodore's eyes widen as he blushes intensely, caught off guard by the intimate scene before him. Theodore remains frozen at the doorway, his silhouette casting a long shadow, while Rhinitis and Instrud look back in surprise. Turning his head slightly, Theodore stares with a cold and narrowed gaze, his thoughts clearly clouded by the unexpected sight. A chibi Theodore hunches over in a fit of extreme embarrassment, realizing he has completely misunderstood the current situation. A sudden door slamming sounding, Theodore tells them to continue before making a hasty and awkward exit from the room. Rhinitis and Instrid look toward the empty doorway in utter confusion, wondering why the Duke left so abruptly and strangely. A sudden gasp sounding, Orty rushes through the mansion hallway with a frantic expression, appearing completely out of breath. A rhythmic dash sounding, Orty catches up to Theodore, explaining how worried he was after finding the Duke's room empty. Orty grabs Theodore's shoulder with an urgent look, demanding to know why he is being so unusually silent right now. A sudden flush sounding, Theodore blushes amidst a sparkling floral background, while a tiny chibi Orty stands frozen in shock. Theodore insists he is fine while turning away, leaving a sweating and confused Orty yelling after him in the hallway. A rhythmic dash sounding, Orty follows Theodore closely, pleading for him to see a doctor and eat a nutritional dinner. Theodore's profile is shown in a moment of quiet contemplation, ignoring Orty's persistent and vocal concern for his physical health. Theodore suddenly stops and quietly requests pudding, leaving a bewildered Orty to question if he heard the Duke correctly. Turning with an intense and serious look, Theodore repeats his request for pudding amidst a beautiful and shimmering floral backdrop. A glistening yellow pudding topped with whipped cream and a bright red cherry sits on a plate, looking absolutely delicious. A sudden gasp sounding, a chibi Rhinitis clasps her hands together in pure delight at the sight of the dessert. Sitting together on the bed, Rhinitis and Claire wonder why pudding was served when there weren't even any mansion guests. Rhinitis looks on in surprise as Claire explains that the sweet treat was specifically requested by Lord Theodore himself today. A chibi Claire explains that although Theodore doesn't usually like sweets, he ordered 20 puddings to be made today. Rhinitis and Claire share the pudding together, laughing happily as the room fills with a warm and joyful mansion atmosphere. A soft whisper sounding, Rhinitis wonders to herself if the sweet gesture was intended to help her recover faster. She blushes slightly with a gentle smile, feeling touched by the silent and thoughtful support from the typically cold Duke. Narrative text explains that Claire, who was once scared of her, has now become a comfortable and supportive friend. Smiling brightly, the twin-tailed maid Claire laughs with pure joy, her past fears completely replaced by genuine and warm affection. In a chibi flashback, Rhinitis and Claire look dejected as they are both scolded for a previous mansion-related mistake. Claire looks at Rhinitis with a pained and tearful gaze, showing her deep empathy for the girl's recent struggles. Narrative text notes that Rhinitis often got scolded, highlighting the shared hardships and growing bond between the two maids. Claire offers a reassuring gesture, telling Rhinitis to leave the remaining mansion tasks to her and Aunt Rita today. A chibi Orty looms over as Claire explains that he is ultimately just concerned about Rhinitis and Theodore's welfare. A soft breeze sounding, Claire waves a cheerful goodbye as she leaves the room, surrounded by beautiful yellow flowers.
Rhinitis waves back with a happy smile, her face still covered in bandages, but her heart feeling significantly lighter.
Rhinitis reflects on how Claire is willing to believe her lie about tripping despite the obvious signs of a fight. A soft touch sounding, she holds the plate of pudding, realizing that others are protecting her secret, just like Instrid. A sudden shout sounding, a pink slime yells that Rhinitis looks ugly, snapping the maid out of her quiet reflection. Sujin fusses over Rhinitis's face with frantic movements, demanding to know exactly what happened to her precious mansion subordinate. Rhinitis laughs off the alarm, urging the pink slime to stay calm and enjoy the delicious pudding with her instead. A sudden wail sounding, Sujin cries hysterically, claiming anyone would think Rhinitis is a monster and hunt her down now.
Rhinitis tells Sujin that her worry makes all the effort of feeding her worth it, leaving the slime creature stunned.
A sudden roar sounding, a fiery Sujin vows to hunt down whoever dared to harm her hardworking and loyal subordinate. A quiet sigh sounding, Rhinitis tells the angry pink slime to just drop the matter before it becomes even more complicated.
A sudden squeeze sounding, Rhinitis squishes Sujin's round face, begging her to stop talking about the violent garden incident.
Looking away, Rhinitis calls Sujin's name with a gentle tone, signaling a shift to a more serious and personal topic. Rhinitis explains that she only wants to live remembering those she likes and those who truly care about her well-being. Narrative text lists her supporters, including Instrud and Claire, as their chibi icons appear in a beautifully decorated background. Sujin looks on with a soft and affectionate expression, clearly moved by Rhinitis's heartfelt words and desire for peace. A sudden flush sounding, the pink slime glows with embarrassment as Rhinitis teases her for being touched by the moment. Rhinitis invites an embarrassed Sujin to eat pudding, teasing the pink slime creature for being touched by her words. Sujin begrudgingly admits the human food is bearable, while Rhinitis excitedly watches her pink companion enjoy the sweet treat. Delighted by the outcome, Rhinitis prepares to take a bite of her own pudding, her face bright with joy. A soft munching sounding, Rhinitis savors the dessert as a sparkling floral background emphasizes her pure and simple contentment. Her blue eyes sparkling, Rhinitis declares the pudding delicious, surrounded by floating hearts and a warm, joyful atmosphere. The scene shifts abruptly as the black-haired Theodore tells someone to get ready, his expression intense and focused.
Theodore suggests using the money he gave her, causing a startled Rhinitis to question exactly what she must prepare.
A loud crash sounding, a chibi Rhinitis wails in despair as she realizes her precious emergency fund is being spent.
Flashing back a few hours, Instrud suggests reinforcing security around the mansion annex to prevent any future intruders.
Theodore dismisses the formal chain of command, while Instrud points out the Duke's distant way of addressing his own family. Instrud maintains his professional stance, insisting his security recommendation follows proper military protocol for the red-haired knight's duty. The mansion annex stands peacefully as narrative dialogue discusses the need for vigilance against any potential and unforeseen threats.
Theodore questions the specific meaning of an eventuality, while Instrud stands ready to deliver troubling news about a recent trespasser.
Narrowing his purple eyes, Theodore listens as Instrud reveals an unauthorized visitor was discovered in the annex backyard yesterday. A sudden realization sounding, Theodore's face illuminates with shock when Instrud names the intruder as the persistent Countess Pablo. Theodore becomes visibly confused by the timeline, questioning why Camilla was present yesterday instead of her scheduled visit. Thinking deeply, Theodore recalls that Camilla was invited much earlier, making her presence during his recent madness highly suspicious.
A romantic aura sounding. Theodore remembers Rhainitis calming him during his curse, the memory filling him with soft, floral warmth.
Theodore blushes intensely while touching his chin, clearly overwhelmed by the realization of Rhainitis' gentle and supportive care.
A quick turn sounding, a flustered Theodore hides his face while Instrude watches with a confused and questioning look. Instrude reports Camilla's claim of disciplining a maid, making Theodore realize the pink-haired girl was the noblewoman's target.
Shrouded in cold blue light, Theodore whispers Rhainitis' name, his expression hardening as the pieces of the puzzle align.
A sudden startle sounding. Theodore stands in shock as Instrude describes rescuing the injured girl and treating her wounds.
Doubled over in distress, Theodore realizes he completely misinterpreted the scene where Instrude was simply tending to Rhainitis' bruises.
Theodore asks for the young lady's full name, and Instrude confirms she is the high-ranking Countess Camilla de Pablo.
Theodore repeats the name Camilla de Pablo, his silhouette darkening as he processes the insult to his mansion's staff.
A cold wind sounding. Theodore vows to remember the name, his purple eyes burning with a silent, protective fury.
A gentle rattle sounding, Rhainitis carries a tea tray through the mansion, feeling significantly better after her day of rest. Walking through the bright hallway, Rhainitis reflects on how quickly her wounds have healed after the night's careful treatment. Chibi Rhainitis insists on returning to her duties, feeling guilty about leaving the mansion work to Aunt Rita and Orty.
Spotting the red-haired knight, Rhainitis calls out to Instrude as he walks toward the Duke's private study.
A rhythmic top sounding, Instrude stops to inform Rhainitis that his meeting with Lord Theodore has just concluded.
An awkward pause sounding. The two stand in the hallway while Instrude observes the maid with a lingering, thoughtful gaze.
A bright cheer sounding. A chibi Instrude compliments Rhainitis' recovery while she reacts with a flustered and startled expression. A deep bow sounding. Rhainitis offers her sincere thanks to the knight for his life-saving help and medical care. Instrude dismisses her gratitude with a gentle wave, insisting his actions were not intended to earn her formal thanks.
Looking down at the maid's pink hair, the knight finds her appearance strangely soft and fluffy, like a small animal.
A soft rustle sounding. Instrude reaches out and gently pats Rhainitis on the head amidst a beautiful, blooming background. Stunned by the unexpected affection, Rhainitis wonders why the knight is suddenly treating her with such casual and warm familiarity. A joyful laugh sounding. Instrude smiles broadly, clearly finding the maid's confused and innocent reaction to be quite charming. A gentle tap sounding. Instrude pats her shoulder while advising her to avoid upsetting powerful people in the future.
Chibi Rhainitis laments her tendency to attract trouble while a confused Instrude listens to her self-deprecating explanation.
Rhainitis explains her father's view on her irritating personality until Theodore suddenly appears, demanding silence in the hallway. A sudden startle sounding. The pair jumps as Theodore coldly notes how friendly they seem right in front of his room.
Theodore tells her to focus while a flustered Rhainitis offers tea, and Instrude departs to handle his security duties.
Rhainitis follows the silent Duke into his room, the atmosphere turning tense as she prepares to serve the tea. Walking away, Instrude smiles to himself, comparing the resilient and gentle Rhainitis to a soft and harmless sheep. A soft sigh sounding. Rhainitis feels dejected by the sheep comparison while she continues her work with a heavy heart. Shrouded in shadows, Theodore stares intensely, his cold and focused gaze suggesting a deep and complicated inner conflict. Theodore's purple eyes glow with a piercing light, his face set in a grim expression as he watches the girl. Theodore's intense gaze makes Rhainitis wonder if she did something wrong as she bows nervously before him. Rhainitis tries to speak, but her words fail her under Theodore's silent and piercing purple-eyed scrutiny. Theodore abruptly turns his head away, leaving Rhinitis startled and confused by his sudden, cold dismissal.
Theodore reflects on his earlier madness and the way Rhinitis' presence continues to remind him of those events.
Theodore notices Rhinitis serving tea despite her unhealed wounds, wishing she had taken more time to rest.
Rhinitis looks surprised as Theodore addresses her while she carefully balances a decorative teapot in the bright room.
Theodore questions the tea while Rhinitis confirms his request, her reflection shimmering in the deep red liquid. A sudden startle sounding, Rhinitis reacts with wide eyes as Theodore tells her to prepare for an outing. Theodore asks about the money he previously gave her, gesturing toward a heavy bag of gold coins. Rhinitis wails in despair as Theodore announces they will spend her precious emergency fund immediately.
Rhinitis remembers saving that money specifically for a future life with her sister, making this spending plan painful. Her hand trembling, Rhinitis stares in horror at a price tag showing a staggering $425,000.
Dressed in a floral gown and hat, Rhinitis reels from the shock of such an astronomical clothing price.
Rhinitis stands overwhelmed in the lavish boutique, wondering where she could possibly wear such incredibly expensive attire.
Looking down with a bead of sweat, Rhinitis remains baffled by the sheer luxury surrounding her. Theodore stands stoically with crossed arms, causing Rhinitis to wonder what deep thoughts are crossing his mind. Theodore explains that since he has business nearby, they will visit the shopping district together. Rhinitis releases a frustrated roar, clearly unhappy about the forced shopping trip and the loss of her savings. Deciding to buy the cheapest item possible, Rhinitis is suddenly interrupted by a rude employee's shout.
A rhythmic running sounding, the brown-haired employee rushes toward Rhinitis, demanding to know what she is doing.
The employee continues her aggressive approach, her fast footsteps echoing through the high-end clothing store. Grabbing a garment, the employee accuses Rhinitis of trying to pull a trick while touching the expensive merchandise. The employee mockingly tells Rhinitis she cannot afford the clothes, dismissing her claim of just browsing.
Pointing a finger, the employee orders Rhinitis to leave the store immediately, in an insulting tone.
A sharp scoff sounding, the employee confirms she is indeed telling the pink-haired girl to get out.
The employee claims Rhinitis' presence ruins the store's image, mocking her when she clenches her fists.
Looking down with a shadowed face, Rhinitis prepares to deliver a surprising and heartfelt response. Rhinitis shouts a joyful thank you, her eyes sparkling with gratitude toward the stunned and confused employee. Delighted to be kicked out, Rhinitis realizes this is the perfect excuse to save her precious gold coins. Rhinitis grabs the employee's hands in a happy frenzy, thanking her for giving her a reason to leave. Theodore's boots click on the floor as he approaches the two women holding hands in the store. Looming over them, Theodore coldly asks if there is a problem, his intense aura filling the room. The employee freezes in terror upon recognizing the high-ranking Lord Theodore standing right before her.
Radiant and aristocratic, Theodore's handsome appearance leaves the employee completely starstruck and frantically reassessing the situation.
A sudden movement sounding, the employee panics and apologizes to Theodore for being a nuisance during his visit. The employee desperately offers her personal assistance to the Duke while Rhinitis tries to interject. Rhinitis realizes the employee thinks she is a stranger to Theodore as she is rudely shooed away. Theodore places a firm hand on Rhinitis' shoulder, demanding to know what was done to his companion.
Rhinitis blushes intensely while the employee gapes in shock at the word companion.
The atmosphere shifts as Theodore's protective stance clarifies his relationship with the girl to everyone present. Theodore's expression remains grim and angry, his sharp purple eyes fixed on the rude shop employee. The employee bows deeply, stammering an apology for failing to recognize Rhinitis' status. Rhinitis is offended when the employee refers to her as a thing before quickly correcting herself. Theodore coldly informs the employee that he is not the one who deserves an apology.
Realizing her mistake, the employee slowly turns her attention toward the maid she just insulted.
The employee begs Rhinitis for forgiveness, though the girl feels the forced apology is far from ideal. Rhinitis wails in protest as the employee tries to drag them toward the exclusive VIP room. Frantically waving her hands, Rhinitis declines the offer while sweating from the awkward and loud confrontation.
Rhinitis internally screams that she simply doesn't want to spend her money in such a place.
A sudden turn sounding, Theodore decides to leave for another store, much to Rhinitis's frantic relief. A quick tap sounding, Rhinitis glances back with a look of relief as she leaves the shop. Behind them, the boutique employee stands in stunned silence as she watches her important guests depart.
Rhinitis reflects on how Lord Theodore's protection feels like a romantic scene from one of her novels. A bright cheer sounding, the pink-haired girl smiles broadly, feeling truly refreshed by the dramatic turn of events. Instrud suggests visiting another store for women's clothing, sparking a sudden wave of panic in the girl.
A sudden movement sounding, Rhinitis frantically shouts for Theodore to stop before they enter an even more expensive boutique.
Desperate to save her coins, Rhinitis tries to convince the men it is late despite the bright sunshine.
A sudden startle sounding, the girl freezes when Theodore promises to personally supervise her next shopping session. Trapped by his kindness, Rhinitis screams internally as she realizes her precious savings are still in grave danger.
A loud shout sounding, Rhinitis boldly declares that she would much rather have cash than a luxury dress.
A joyful laugh sounding, Instrud finds her blunt honesty hilarious while Theodore stares back in complete, stunned silence. Rhinitis doubles down on her request, leaving the black-haired Duke completely bewildered by her preference for money. Explaining her reasoning, the maid tells Theodore that cash is far more useful for her future than formal wear. A muffled chuckle sounding, Instrud struggles to contain his amusement while the girl tells him to stop laughing. Chibi Instrud continues to tease her while Rhinitis fuming over the loss of her dignity and her savings. Looking away, Rhinitis solemnly vows to leave the mansion once Theodore is healthy and the madness is gone. Shrouded in blue light, Theodore reflects on her wish to eventually be with the person she loves. A soft sigh sounding, the Duke's expression remains melancholic as he processes her desire for a future elsewhere.
Misunderstanding her words, Theodore assumes she has a lover, while Rhinitis actually dreams of living with her sister.
An awkward silence sounding, the Duke turns his back on the pair, lost in his own complicated, brooding thoughts. Relieved when Theodore finally agrees to return home, Rhinitis celebrates the safety of her precious gold coins. Exhausted from the day's stress, Rhinitis slumps forward while Instrud confirms their immediate return to the mansion. Once inside the carriage, the girl closes her eyes, wishing only for a quick return and deep rest. Theodore observes her weariness, noting that the events of the day have clearly taken a heavy toll on her. A rhythmic rattle sounding, Rhinitis falls fast asleep as the carriage travels back toward the Duke's grand estate. Theodore watches her sleeping form, wondering if her current sitting position is uncomfortable during the bumpy ride home. A soft breathing sounding, the girl remains deep in slumber, her face peaceful despite the carriage's constant motion. Looking at her with a heavy heart, Theodore repeats her earlier words about reuniting with a loved one. The Duke's gaze remains fixed on the maid as he ponders the depth of her devotion to someone else. Resting his chin on his hand, Theodore continues to watch her, feeling a strange and lingering sense of envy. Closing his eyes, Theodore observes that she seems quite happy in her sleep, unlike his own troubled life. Theodore reflects on the dark day his madness first manifested, a memory that still haunts his every waking moment.
Fearing a miserable end with no one to mourn him, the Duke sits alone in the carriage's dim light.
Recalling how his own parents labeled him a monster, Theodore feels a deep, crushing despair for his future. A gentle rattle sounding,
Theodore realizes his attempt to help her only resulted in more kindness from the girl. Mumbling in her sleep, Rheonidas complains about her hair, her brow furrowing slightly as she remains completely unconscious.
A soft tickle sounding, the girl reacts to the stray strands of pink hair brushing against her tired face. A soft rustle sounding. Theodore reaches out to gently tuck her hair away, his touch surprisingly careful and light.
A sudden mumble sounding. Rhenitis complains about being full in her sleep, causing Theodore to pause his gentle movement.
A soft rustle sounding. The Duke continues to adjust her hair while watching her peaceful, dreaming face with intrigue.
Theodore blames himself for her suffering, while the sleeping Rheonidas continues to mumble about being unable to eat.
Chibi Rheonidas dreams vividly of eating pudding, leaving the Duke to wonder what strange things she is dreaming about.
Smiling and drooling in her sleep, the pink-haired girl seems entirely focused on her delicious, imaginary dessert. Theodore recalls his father's cold words about enchantresses being nothing more than tools to suppress a nobleman's madness. Remembering their earlier kiss, Theodore realizes his initial motive was simply a desperate need for the girl's calming magic. A heavy jolt sounding, Theodore catches the sleeping girl's head just before she falls forward from her seat. A soft chuckle sounding, the Duke smiles warmly as he holds her, finding her current predicament quite endearing. A rhythmic knock sounding, Theodore signals to those outside, his expression softening as he looks down at her.
Instrude answers the summons immediately, acknowledging the Duke's call from his position outside the moving carriage.
Theodore orders the driver to slow down, wanting to ensure the sleeping girl is not disturbed by the road.
Instrude questions the delay, but Lord Theodore orders the carriage to proceed slowly and safely for the sleeping girl.
A rhythmic rattle sounding, the carriage wheel spins as Theodore reflects on how an enchantress can uniquely bring hope.
While Rheonidas slumbers, Theodore ponders the possibility of a peaceful end waiting for him because of her presence.
The golden light of the setting sun fills the carriage as the Duke watches over the resting pink-haired maid. A soft sniff sounding, the scene shifts to a young Theodore crying alone under the shade of a massive tree. A sudden rustle sounding, a long-haired man approaches the boy, gently asking the weeping child why he is so upset. The man helps the young boy to his feet, but Theodore's bright purple eyes remain clouded with lingering sorrow. Shocked by a sudden discovery, the boy stares at a hand drenched in blood, while a voice asks him what is wrong. In a red-tinted nightmare, an older man tells the adult Theodore that their blood-soaked hands are exactly the same. A soft slide sounding, the man holds Theodore's face as the weight of their shared, violent lineage crushes them both. Bound by glowing chains, the smiling man declares Theodore the heir of the cursed Caro bloodline, just like himself. A bloody hand muffles Theodore's mouth as the man whispers that all hope for his future is completely futile. Surrounded by a pool of blood, Theodore gazes at a body riddled with arrows, trapped by his inescapable, dark fate.
Theodore gasps as he jolts awake, sweat dripping down his face as the horrific memories of the dream linger.
Rheonidas stands over him with a blanket, her face flushed with surprise at his sudden and intense reaction.
Blushing deeply, the Duke stares at the pink-haired girl and whispers her name as he regains his bearings.
A sudden startle sounding, Theodore asks Rheonidas what she is doing as she hovers over him in his private chambers.
Flustered and waving the blanket, the maid frantically explains she only meant to cover him while he was sleeping.
Touching his head, Theodore tries to calm his racing heart, wondering if the blood-soaked scenes were merely a dream.
Chibi Rheonidas rambles about temperature shifts and colds while Theodore wonders why she is acting so incredibly flustered. A soft rustle sounding, Rheonidas mentions her sister's advice, prompting the Duke to comment on their close relationship. After sharing details about her upbringing, Rheonidas suddenly realizes she is revealing far too much about her family's private life. Panicking, Rhainatis fears the Duke might become obsessed with her sister, imagining a dark and terrifying version of him. Desperate to change the subject, Rhainatis asks if he is an only child, hoping to divert his growing curiosity.
Theodore reveals he had an older brother, a fact that leaves Rhainatis completely stunned and questioning the novel's original plot.
Rhainatis is deeply confused, searching her memory for any mention of a sibling that she might have somehow overlooked. The maid wonders why Theodore inherited the title if he wasn't the eldest, while the Duke remains silent and brooding.
Rhainatis imagines wild theories about the brother being a rebel or running away for love, her mind racing with possibilities.
Driven by intense curiosity, the pink-haired girl boldly asks Theodore about the current whereabouts of his older brother. The atmosphere grows heavy as Theodore delivers a blunt and devastating answer, stating that his brother has died.
Theodore explains that the madness claimed his brother 18 years ago, marking the beginning of the family's tragic downfall.
Looking grim, the Duke reveals the true horror of the event, explaining that his brother died right before his eyes.
Silence falls between them as Rhainatis stands before the seated Duke, processing the weight of his dark and painful confession.
Rhainatis is shocked by this new information, realizing the tragedy was far worse than anything ever described in her novel.
When asked why they didn't find an enchantress for his brother, Theodore reveals that they actually did find one. The Duke's expression remains cold and haunted as he prepares to recount the most gruesome part of his family history.
Theodore explains that his brother's madness was too powerful, ultimately leading him to murder the very enchantress meant to save him. Shocked to her core, Rhainatis listens as Theodore describes how his father was forced to shoot his own rampaging son.
Looking away in shame, the Duke admits to witnessing both the murder and his brother's execution with his own eyes. Theodore reiterates that this horrific truth is the reality he carries, his gaze fixed on the flowers beside him. Standing behind him, Rhainatis feels a wave of sympathy, imagining the absolute terror of seeing a family member kill another.
A tight squeeze sounding, the girl grips the fabric in her hands, deeply moved by the Duke's crushing childhood trauma. Theodore looks at Rhainatis, thinking the story must be shocking to her as she starts to tremble.
A soft slide sounding, Theodore orders her to leave, fearing he might one day hurt her during a fit of madness.
A quick toss sounding, Rhainatis throws the blanket over his head in a sudden, adorable burst of frantic energy.
Grabbing his face, Rhainatis looks him in the eye and firmly tells him that everything is going to be okay.
The maid passionately declares that Theodore would never commit such a horrific act, her eyes filled with unwavering belief. Startled by her intensity, the Duke listens as Rhainatis promises that only good things will happen to him from now on. Gripping him tightly, Rhainatis boldly claims she is strong enough to survive and won't die easily like the others. A sudden gasp sounding, Chibi Theodore complains that her intense and emotional hug is actually quite suffocating. Rhainatis tries to explain her blanket wrapping as a happy kimbap to the visibly confused Duke Theodore.
Quickly reflecting on her actions, the maid frantically apologizes for her sudden and intense emotional outburst.
Rhainatis insists her intentions were good, while Chibi Theodore watches her with a skeptical and blank expression. Bathed in a soft glow, Theodore remains quiet as he processes the girl's chaotic but well-meaning kindness. Feeling the lingering heat of her embrace, Theodore notes how warm it is, while Rhainatis panics in the background. As night falls, the Duke's grand estate stands silent under the watchful gaze of a bright full moon. Tucked into bed, Rhainatis frets over her behavior, hoping her employer didn't find her overreaction too strange. Her eyes wide with resolve, the maid cannot stop thinking about the tragic family secrets Theodore shared with her. Rhainatis calculates Theodore's age during his childhood trauma, while her pink slime companion, Sujin, makes a hungry sound. Lying in the dim light, the girl realizes that everything about Theodore's current personality finally makes perfect sense.
Rheonidas envisions Theodore as a lost, pitiful child, understanding the source of the deep sadness she feels for him.
A soft nom sounding, Sujin the slime nibbles on the blanket, while Rheonidas pities the terror Theodore must have felt. Gripped by a sudden worry, Rheonidas wonders what would happen if things turned dark, even with a tiny chance.
A sharp slice sounding. A hand grips a blood-drenched knife in a dark and menacing vision of violence. Rheonidas imagines her sister standing over her with a bloody blade, her face hidden in a terrifying nightmare.
The grim vision dissolves into comedy as her sister happily prepares tomato soup, much to the chibi maid's relief. Squeezing Sujin tightly, Rheonidas rejects her own dark imagination, insisting her sister is too kind to ever be cruel. The maid's thoughts shift to her sister's cold beauty persona, imagining her as a stoic and powerful warrior. Surrounded by roses, the vision of her beautiful sister leaves Rheonidas in a state of absolute, starstruck awe.
A rhythmic thud sounding. Rheonidas kicks her legs in excitement, fangirling over her sister's beauty, while Sujin watches, bewildered.
Waking up from the noise, Sujin the slime complains about the racket, forcing a sheepish Rheonidas to apologize. Sitting up, Rheonidas asks the slime for advice on how she can help improve the Duke's miserable life.
Looking downcast, the pink-haired girl worries that Theodore will continue to leave a life filled with sorrow and loneliness.
Determined to change his fate, Rheonidas expresses a sincere desire to do something meaningful for the haunted Duke.
Sujin bluntly points out that Theodore is rich and powerful, questioning why Rheonidas is even worried about him. Rheonidas stares in stunned silence, her mind momentarily blanking at the slime's simple and logical observation.
Recovering quickly, the maid passionately argues that true happiness cannot be bought with all the gold in the world.
A smug look appearing, Sujin counters that Theodore might just need more money to finally be truly happy.
Rheonidas is left speechless once again, her eyes wide as she processes the slime's cynical view of human happiness. Frustrated by the slime's logic, the pink-haired girl tries to think of a better way to defend her point.
Pouting in her chibi form, Rheonidas realizes she can't easily argue back because the slime's words hold a kernel of truth.
Sujin suggests there is a specific way for a female to make a male feel better without any money. A dramatic thud sounding. The slime reveals the secret method, causing Rheonidas to react with shock and confusion. Blushing furiously, Rheonidas screams at the slime, demanding to know where a simple creature learned such scandalous things. Sujin remains dazed, questioning if a simple massage is really something the maid needs to get so flustered about. Realizing she was the only one with a dirty mind, Rheonidas feels incredibly embarrassed about her perverted misunderstanding.
A heavy thud sounding, Sujin explains that a relaxing massage would keep the Duke from feeling so miserable and tense. A sudden spark sounding, Rheonidas lifts the slime high, enthusiastically declaring that her companion is a total genius.
Sujin is dazed by the sudden praise, wondering if they have actually become a genius in the maid's eyes.
Rheonidas celebrates her new mission, deciding to transform the Duke's dark tragedy into a heartwarming, healing story. The screen fills with a bold declaration of her intent to turn the novel into a peaceful, healing story.
Holding Sujin amidst a background of flowers, Rheonidas is fully committed to her new, noble goal for Theodore. A sudden realization hitting, Rheonidas stops her celebration to wonder what exactly a healing story actually entails. Panic sets in as Rheonidas realizes she has spent her past life reading romance novels, never a single healing one.
A vision of a blonde king appears as Rheonidas reflects on the specific types of stories she preferred before.
Memories of emperors, CEOs, and beastmen flood her mind, all representing the classic tropes of her past reading habits. The girl admits her past self only loved the obsessive, crazy, and scheming villains found in dark fantasy romances. Collapsing in comedic despair,
Rhinitis regrets not canceling her e-library membership before her untimely and sudden death.
While she remembers her books, Rhinitis realizes with a start that she has no memory of how she died.
Touching her hand to the ground, the girl wonders if her end was a tragic accident or a long illness.
A loud, sharp "Hey!" sounding from Sujin startles the pink-haired girl as she reflects on her past.
Sujin bounces angrily, complaining about being dropped, while Rhinitis offers a quick and sheepish apology.
After Sujin demands more praise, Rhinitis sighs at her fate while patting the demanding pink slime companion. Cradling the soft creature, the girl notes that Sujin finally seems to be in a much better mood. A soft smile appears on Rhinitis' face as she confirms her own heart is feeling light and happy. Rhinitis reflects that while her past life ended, her present self and this new life are what truly matter. Looking out the window, the girl vows to transform this world into a peaceful and healing story.
A sudden realization hits, sending Rhinitis into comedic despair as she realizes she has no plan for healing.
Sitting on her bed, the pink-haired girl asks Sujin when a person actually feels good and at ease.
Sujin's idea of healing is total world domination, a concept Rhinitis finds completely opposite to her goal.
Rhinitis demands a human perspective, but Sujin logically points out that it isn't human and can't provide one. Sujin argues that delicious offerings are true happiness, prompting Rhinitis to imagine the Duke eating even better meals. Pausing with a thoughtful, sounding, Rhinitis considers the slime's simple but surprisingly logical perspective on joy. Softly sliding, Sujin admits it enjoys sleeping next to her, a rare and sweet confession of genuine affection. The slime notes that a strange, sweet, and cozy scent constantly comes from the pink-haired girl.
Sujin explains that her scent ensures good dreams, leaving Rhinitis visibly touched by her companion's honest words.
Deeply moved, Rhinitis cries out Sujin's name while clutching her face in a burst of pure emotional joy.
Rhinitis hugs Sujin tightly, declaring she isn't lonely with the slime nearby, much to the creature's startled confusion.
Looking squished and exhausted, Sujin suggests they just go to sleep, ending their chaotic but heartwarming conversation. Tucked into bed, Rhinitis realizes that she really shouldn't expect deep philosophical wisdom from a simple slime. The girl concludes that the keys to a healing life are simply delicious food and a good night's sleep. The scene shifts to the kitchen, where Claire, the brown-haired maid, looks surprised to see her friend.
Looking exhausted with dark circles under her eyes, Rhinitis forces a weak laugh when Claire asks about her face. Rhinitis admits she had a lot on her mind as Claire leans in, clearly worried about her friend's health.
Thinking back, the pink-haired girl realizes Claire has become a close friend who constantly worries about her well-being. Feeling healed by Claire's kindness, Rhinitis finds a moment of peace, despite her lingering exhaustion from the night.
Rhinitis claims she wants a light breakfast, despite her tray being comically piled high with bread and soup.
While Claire offers to help her rest, a tall and muscular blonde man approaches the two maids from behind. The blonde man dismisses their concerns, mockingly questioning the big deal about them just sitting and chatting.
Staring in confusion while eating, Rhinitis listens as the man asks if she overheard his judgmental comments.
Rhinitis apologizes for accidentally speaking her thoughts aloud, realizes she has drawn the man's unwanted attention.
The blonde man scolds Rhinitis, accusing her of slacking off and making everyone else work much harder. Rhinitis defensively explains that her hair is naturally curly and messy, not a sign of laziness or rushing. Leaning in aggressively, the man demands to know what Rhinitis actually does once she wakes up each morning.
A startled Claire stammers that she chops vegetables, which the man uses to prove their superior work ethic.
Reinatis fumes as the man rants about her receiving special treatment from the other staff members.
Reflecting quietly, Reinatis notes that shouting without understanding the situation won't help the man's angry outburst. Reinitis imagines her job as a dangerous, extreme role, picturing the mansion's masters as terrifying figures.
The man continues to berate her, claiming that the entire staff is suffering because of her perceived laziness.
A heavy sigh sounding, the pink-haired girl looks down at her food, clearly drained by the man's constant nagging.
While the man keeps talking, Reinitis reflects on how difficult it is to actually maintain a healing story. Snapping with sudden intensity, Reinatis stands up and loudly demands to know where the axe is kept. Looking determined, the girl declares that even a healing story is tough, leaving Claire in a state of shock.
A startled gasp sounding, Claire stares in horror, unable to comprehend why Reinitis would suddenly need a weapon.
Claire stammers that an axe is only for chopping wood, desperately trying to stop Reinatis' sudden, violent turn.
Looking back with a cold gaze, Reinitis listens as the terrified Claire begs her to remember that violence is wrong.
The scene shifts outside to the woodpile where the staff has gathered, while a chicken watches from above.
A loud cuckoo sounding from the rooster punctuates the tense standoff between the blonde man and Reinitis.
Claire trembles in fear, pleading with Reinatis, while the pink-haired girl wonders what the maid is so worried about. A sharp, "Hey, mister!" sounding, Reinatis points a bold finger at the blonde man, challenging him directly.
Reinitis points a confident finger, promising to outwork the blonde man and chop enough wood for the entire estate. The blonde man mockingly questions if a little thing like her truly understands the estate's heavy labor demands.
Secretly fuming, Reinatis clenches her fist, wishing she could chop something far more satisfying than a pile of wood.
A determined look crossing her face, the pink-haired girl prepares to propose a bet that will end his insults.
Reinatis challenges the skeptical man to a wood-chopping contest, vowing that he must never criticize her work again. A sudden pat sounding. The maid shocks the man by wagering 20% of her monthly salary on her victory. While Claire panics over the high stakes, the man goads Reinitis, offering her a final chance to back out. Grinning greedily with a sick sounding, the man accepts the bet, certain he will soon collect her hard-earned wages.
The two reach a firm agreement, with the man promising to silence any future staff gossip if she wins.
A sharp pwok sounding, the man grips his axe and prepares to go first, confident his record is unbeatable. The blonde man continues his arrogant taunts, belittling her dainty hands, while Reinatis calmly prepares for her own turn.
A sudden byunjak sounding. Reinatis effortlessly lifts the massive axe high, surprising everyone with her hidden, raw power.
The man reminds the group of his record, while a worried Claire reflects on the girl's true village champion identity. A loud jak sounding, Reinatis splits the logs with explosive force, proving she was the strongest kid in her village.
In a quiet, floral-framed moment, the black-haired Duke, Theodore, remains lost in a deep daze while attempting to read.
Orty approaches Theodore, questioning the Duke's preoccupation after noticing he hasn't turned a single page of his book.
Theodore stares intensely at the pages, unable to focus as his assistant observes his master's unusually distracted state. Turning to his aide with a sharp suck sounding, Theodore prepares to ask a question that has haunted his thoughts. A confused Chibi Orty reacts with shock when the Duke suddenly asks him about the meaning of happy gimbap.
Theodore reflects on the maid's healing advice before dismissing the topic, deciding he should just ask the girl herself.
Touching the book cover, Theodore claims his question stems from simple curiosity, though his heavy gaze suggests a deeper interest. The black-haired man maintains his cold facade, insisting that he isn't looking forward to the girl's ideas at all. Turning back toward his book, Theodore's mind continues to wander toward the pink-haired maid and her comforting perspective.
Back outside, a loud thud sounding marks the girl's total victory over the slumped and thoroughly exhausted blonde man.
The surrounding mansion staff erupts into a massive cheer, celebrating the young girl's incredible and unexpected display of power.
Amidst the shock, the workers marvel at her record-shattering strength, while Claire sparkles with immense pride for her friend.
A firm pwok sounding, rhinitis reminds the trembling man of his earlier promise to stop picking fights with her.
The man gazes up in terror as the girl dismisses his earlier arrogant attitude, enjoying her hard-won and satisfying triumph.
Claire and Rhinitis walk away from the woodpile, satisfied that the estate's atmosphere has finally been restored to peace.
A loud kororuk sounding from her stomach, the chibi girl realizes her display of strength has left her famished.
A sharp jirit sounding, the girl fumes about her interrupted breakfast while the terrified blonde man flees from her aura. Claire kindly offers to find food, unaware the staff is now questioning if Rhinitis is actually a powerful enchantress. As they walk, the workers gossip about her brute strength, while Claire simply confirms that her friend is a good person. Suddenly snapping, the hungry Rhinitis screams for kimchi fried rice, startling Claire with her specific and intense craving. The girl groans in despair when a confused Claire asks what kimchi is, highlighting their massive cultural divide. Rhinitis imagines a mouth-watering spread of Korean dishes, longing for the healing flavors from her past life.
A loud rumble sounding, the maid realizes that satisfying her own hunger is the key to Theodore's happiness.
A sudden gasp sounding, the pink-haired girl realizes that delicious, untasted food is the ultimate way to heal a heart. Everything suddenly clicks into place as she decides to give Theodore something he has never tasted before. A sharp diapsak sounding, Rhinitis grabs Claire's hands, filled with a sudden and urgent culinary mission for the Duke. A sudden hwak sounding, the maid drags a bewildered Claire toward the kitchen to begin preparing her special recipes. Running through the halls, Rhinitis urges Claire to hurry, desperate to start cooking her K-food for Theodore. The scene shifts to a grand, sunlit room in the mansion as preparations for an afternoon meeting begin. Theodore stands alone, looking slightly awkward as he reflects that their meeting was originally supposed to be tea time.
Rhinitis excitedly explains that her new creation is a snack that doubles as a hearty and satisfying meal.
Theodore reacts with a sudden umjol startle as the girl presents a tray made especially for him.
A loud pa'at sounding, the maid triumphantly lifts the silver dome, urging the Duke to enjoy the special dish. Theodore stares in stunned, wide-eyed silence, his vibrant purple eyes reflecting complete shock at the maid's unusual offering. A cute chibi illustration shows the two girls happily skipping back to the kitchen for their next adventure.
Arriving in the kitchen to make more food, Rhinitis realizes there is one major problem standing in her way.
A sudden realization strikes Rhinitis as she finds she lacks every essential ingredient for her K-food mission. Imagining stews and bulgogi, the girl despairs over the lack of soy sauce and her mother's kimchi. Rhinitis fumes over the missing ingredients, while a worried Claire asks her friend if she is feeling okay. Slumping in defeat, Rhinitis wonders how other healing story protagonists manage to cook Korean staples without ingredients. A spark of hope ignites in her eyes as the pink-haired girl suddenly realizes that chicken is available. Rhinitis excitedly plans a fried chicken feast, leaving a confused Claire wondering why her friend is so overjoyed. The scene shifts to a silent moment of pause as Rhinitis begins to formulate her next culinary plan. Gathering in the kitchen, Rhinitis asks a surprised Claire if she is familiar with the wonders of fried chicken.
Claire explains that while Theodore avoids fried food, the mansion's chef still produces occasional crispy dishes.
Excited by the mention of fried cod, Rhinitis feels more confident than ever about her impending recipe. The mood dampens slightly as Claire mentions needing the head chef's permission to handle premium ingredients like chicken.
A bold determination returns to Rhinitis's face as she decides to invent a brand new seasoned chicken dish.
Plots and schemes fill the air as the two maids prepare to create a culinary masterpiece for the Duke.
Disaster strikes again when the girls realize they have no gochujang, sending Renatitas into a dramatic state of collapse. Using spaghetti, tomato sauce, and red pepper powder, the girls improvise a creative rose sauce substitute for the meal. The result of their frantic efforts is Rena's special spaghetti, a bizarre fusion of spaghetti and Korean tteokbokki. Presenting the plate to Theodore, Rhainitis claims it is a special recipe from her very distant hometown. Theodore observes the strange dish with a skeptical gaze, wondering what exactly he is expected to eat. While Theodore suspects poison, a proud Rhainitis wishes she could have made a more authentic dish for him. Rhainitis daydreams about Theodore being so impressed by her cooking that he appoints her as his personal chef. Theodore tentatively lifts a forkful of the spicy noodles, preparing to brave the maid's unusual culinary experiment. Gagging immediately, the black-haired Duke realizes with horror that the dish is completely and utterly inedible. Rhainitis's cooking reputation collapses in an instant as Theodore reflects on the truly strange taste of the meal. Shocked by his rejection, Rhainitis watches in disbelief as Theodore pushes the plate away in genuine disgust. Theodore bluntly lists the flaws, complaining that the meal is simultaneously too spicy and aggressively sweet. The critique continues as the Duke notes an overwhelming fishy odor, paired with a cloying scent of honey. Looking truly pathetic, the pink-haired girl trembles while asking if her masterpiece is really that terrible. A heavy silence fills the room as Theodore stares at the girl, his appetite completely ruined by her cooking. Theodore lets out a long, weary sigh, clearly exhausted by the maid's bizarre and unsuccessful culinary efforts. Giving up on the meal entirely, Theodore asks for tea to wash away the lingering taste of failure. A loud sounding from Chibi Rhinatides as she finally tastes her own creation and regrets everything. Gagging on her own food, the girl realizes that her special recipe is a culinary disaster of epic proportions. Rhainitis wonders how everything went so wrong, relieved that the Duke didn't actually punish her for the attempt. Reflection hits her as Rhainitis realizes she was never the one who actually did the cooking back home. A memory surfaces of Estella doing all the hard work while Rena simply made a mess with the ingredients. Rhainitis remembers her kind mother from her past life, a gentle teacher who always provided warm, home-cooked meals. Thinking of her past life's mother brings a rare moment of warmth to the girl's otherwise chaotic day. The girl gazes at the flowers, wishing she had any real memories of her mother from this current life. Rhainitis envisions a beautiful mother nursing her as a baby, though the memory remains frustratingly out of reach. A quiet focus remains on the discarded dish as Rhainitis contemplates the distance between memory and reality. Cheering up, the Chibi girl celebrates her friendship with Estella, deciding to move past her cooking failure. Raising a fist in determination, Rhainitis vows to find a better way to bring happiness to the Duke. Theodore stands alone in the moonlight, still unable to shake the terrible, lingering taste of the spaghetti. Theodore reflects on the girl's audacity, realizing she served him food she hadn't even bothered to taste herself. A small blush appearing on his cheek, the black-haired man notes how truly strange the maid is. Softening, Theodore recalls her sparkling eyes and desperate effort, admitting to himself that her behavior was actually cute. Theodore gazes out the window, wondering if the girl is already asleep or causing more trouble elsewhere. Standing in the blue-hued room, the Duke quietly admits to himself that he genuinely misses her presence. A dark, shadowy figure looms over Theodore, mockingly questioning his feelings for the monster and witch. Sharp gasp sounds escape Theodore as the dark voice taunts him about his growing affection for the girl. Theodore gasps in terror as malevolent dark voices mock his growing affection for the pink-haired maid.
A haunting vision of blood-stained hands clutching Reinatus appears, suggesting a tragic and violent outcome for them. A firm pwak sounding. The shadow voice declares that Theodore cannot escape his cruel and bloody fate. Standing alone in the blue-hued room, the Duke gasps for breath, desperately trying to escape his internal torment. Drenched in a cold sweat, Theodore struggles to maintain his sanity after the overwhelming and terrifying psychological attack. A weary sigh escaping him, the black-haired man grips his face, haunted by the voices and his own feelings. Reinitas looks at her failed culinary creation, unaware that the dark voices are still questioning her status as a monster. Frustrated by her cooking disaster, the exhausted girl falls into a deep sleep alongside a curious pink slime. Suddenly waking up, the pink-haired girl is startled by a vivid memory from her past life that provides a new idea. A sharp pwak sounding. A gloved hand seizes a bundle of leaves as a new agricultural plan takes root. Reinitas triumphantly announces that farming is the ultimate healing activity, her eyes sparkling with a renewed sense of purpose. A cute chibi Claire sparkles with admiration, cheering for her friend's sudden and enthusiastic shift toward manual labor. The two maids celebrate a massive and successful sweet potato harvest, laughing together at their impressive and efficient teamwork. Reinitas recalls images of farming from healing stories, feeling confident that manual labor is the key to her mission. Grabbing Claire's hands, the pink-haired girl urgently asks her friend if she truly enjoys the hard work of farming. Reinitas notes that she doesn't particularly love the work, but she is very used to village labor from before. Claire realizes that Rena's past labor explains her incredible strength, finally understanding why she was so good at chopping wood. The maids feel a deep sense of pride and satisfaction as they gaze over their clean and bountiful harvest. Reinitas reflects on her recent peace of mind, realizing how much she has missed working under the open sky. Gazing at the clear autumn sky, the girl enjoys the simple pleasure of working the earth and smelling the soil. A firm pwak sounding, Reinitas clenches her fist, fully convinced that farming is the perfect path to healing. Digging with a pwak sound, the girl loses herself in the work while Claire watches her friend's intense enthusiasm. A close-up reveals Reinatus' genuine joy as the rhythmic labor successfully clears all the worries from her mind. Suddenly collapsing with an "ah," the girl realizes her plan is flawed because a noble like Theodore would never farm. Reinitas fumes over the impossibility of her idea, knowing that a graceful duke avoids getting dirt on his hands. The girl envisions a refined Theodore who only ever interacts with crops when they are served on his dining table. Slumping in defeat with a "diuk," Reinitas fears she might be executed if she ever tried to drag the duke into the fields. A loud "you-ah-ang" sounding as Rena cries. A brown-haired man approaches the garden and observes her dramatic despair. The brown-haired man, Lord Ordy, skeptically notes that it isn't even hot enough for the maid to have heat stroke. Lord Ordy confronts the girl about her work habits, noting that she has never even requested a single day off. Reinitas experiences a sudden wave of déjà vu as she recalls Ordy making the exact same comment in the past. Trembling with worry about her hidden stash, Reinitas asks if taking a rest is truly a mandatory requirement. Ordy suggests that Rena needs a recharge, noticing that she has been appearing quite stressed throughout the day. While Ordy reassures her, a chibi Reinatis worries about who will look after the Duke during her brief absence. Reinitas is shocked to learn from Ordy that Theodore has been sleeping well lately, challenging her expectations of the story. A sudden pot sounding. Rena blushes and wonders if Theodore possesses one of those legendary high-stamina romance protagonist buffs. Chibi Reinatus reflects on how male leads always seem full of energy after only a few short hours of sleep. A gentle todak sounding as Ordy pats her head. He encourages Rena to rest whenever she needs to recharge.
A sudden jiobak sounding as Ordi walks away, leaving a blushing and completely bewildered Rina in his wake. Staring at his retreating back, Rhainitis wonders if the man really came all the way here just to tell her that.
The girl notes that while Ordi's first impression wasn't great, he seems surprisingly thoughtful and kind after all.
A sudden kya sounding, Claire reacts with shock and embarrassment as Ordi turns his attention back toward her.
Lord Ordi maintains a neutral and stoic expression as he gazes at the brown-haired maid with a serious look.
Claire looks at him with wide, sparkling eyes, recognizing the man's presence with a mix of awe and surprise.
A sharp kumjak sounding, Ordi bluntly asks why Claire is screaming in his face, leaving her completely flustered. Looking truly pathetic, Rina immediately takes back her positive thoughts about Ordi as he continues to be overly blunt.
A loud ang sounding as Chibi Claire cries. Rhainitis pities her friend for having to deal with the man's attitude.
A weary ha sounding. The pink-haired girl decides that she needs to step in to help her poor, crying friend.
Lord Ordi mumbles something to himself, his side profile reflecting a momentary lapse into deep and private thought.
A sudden suda-dum sounding as Ordi pats Claire's head, sending the brown-haired maid into a state of blissful euphoria.
Claire blushes deeply, her expression filled with a mix of surprise and lingering shock from her recent encounter.
Lord Ordi stoically walks away, leaving a stunned Claire to recover from their blunt and confusing interaction.
Rhainitis watches them with excitement, her romance fantasy reader instincts flaring up at the potential for blossoming drama. Claire hysterically misinterprets Ordi's words, imagining he threatened to smash her head while Rina watches her friends panic.
Rina reassures her friend that the gesture was meant as encouragement, but Claire remains deeply skeptical of his intent. Their interpretation takes a dark turn as they worry Ordi was actually threatening to break Rina's arm next time.
Shifting topics, Rina asks why Claire came to her room as her friend continues to tremble like a ghost.
A chibi Claire approaches Rhainitis with a bashful expression, urgently asking her for a special and unexpected favor. Rhainitis shouts out in surprise while holding a fireplace poker, agreeing to help her friend with the evening chores.
Squatting by the hearth, the pink-haired girl attempts to light the fire for her busy and exhausted friend. A chibi Claire apologizes as the narration explains the servants take turns tending to the Duke's fireplace every evening. Poking the logs, Rina hopes to finish the task quickly before Theodore returns to his private quarters for the night. The girl notes the fire is perfect for roasting sweet potatoes, but tries to stay focused on her actual duty.
Theodore suddenly appears, catching Rina off guard as she contemplates sneaking a snack from the hot embers.
A loud dalkyong sounding as Rina jumps in terror, realizing the Duke has been sitting right beside her. Startled, Rina asks how long he's been there, while Theodore questions why she is doing this particular chore. Theodore looks at the pink-haired girl with concern, asking if someone forced this extra labor onto her unfairly. Rina's eyes widen in surprise as she processes the Duke's unexpected line of questioning and his uncharacteristically serious expression. Theodore leans in, pressuring her to explain why she is performing a task that is clearly outside her duties. Rina frantically denies being forced into the work while the Duke remains suspicious about her sudden change in roles. Theodore recalls rumors of servant bullying, imagining a scene of conflict while a chibi blonde man cries in distress. Blushing, the girl tries to convince him it's a simple misunderstanding and not an active workplace harassment. Chibi Theodore asks for the real reason as a sweating Chibi Rina struggles to find a believable excuse. Earlier, Claire had explained her dilemma, confirming she asked Rina to handle the fireplace as a personal favor. A sharp kumjak sounding as Claire startles when Rina asks if there is an underlying problem with her health. Claire hesitates, her face flushing as she tries to find the words to explain her deeply embarrassing situation. Seeing her friend struggle, Rina kindly offers her an out, telling her she doesn't have to speak if it's hard.
Rhainitis is left speechless and horrified as the truth is revealed through a series of unmistakable internal sounds.
To several toot sounds, Claire admits she overindulged in sweet potatoes, and her stomach is now paying the price.
Rena feels relieved her friend avoided an accident near Orty as a grateful Claire grabs her hands in thanks.
Claire offers a massive king sweet potato as a reward, leaving Rena wondering where she found such a specimen.
The brown-haired maid waves a cheerful goodbye, leaving Rena alone with the oversized vegetable and her unfinished task. Back in the present, Rena panics internally, wondering how to explain the sweet potato situation to the watching Duke.
Theodore gazes at her intensely, deciding that the girl isn't lying, even if her behavior remains incredibly strange.
The Duke asks what she plans to roast, and Rena sheepishly admits her intention to cook the sweet potato. Rena argues that fire-roasted potatoes are a completely different experience from the cold garnishes served at his dinner table.
With spark, Theodore stares at her in silence, seemingly mesmerized by her passionate and hungry description of the simple food.
Rena continues her blissful lecture on the joy of eating hot potatoes, surrounded by an aura of blooming flowers.
A rare, gentle smile spreads across the Duke's face as he listens to the girl's enthusiastic and innocent rambling.
Theodore surprises her by simply stating he wants to eat some, causing Rena to recoil in absolute shock.
Chibi Rena trembles with worry, wondering what the brooding male lead's request actually implies for her continued safety.
To her amazement, Theodore takes a bite and genuinely compliments the delicious taste of the humble roasted potato.
A Chibi Rena is stunned that Claire's potato is actually being shared and enjoyed by the powerful Duke.
Theodore handles the hot vegetable with surprising care, peeling it while focusing intently on his simple and rustic meal.
Rena is shocked to see him eat with his hands as Chibi Theodore encourages her to try it too. While Rena worries she should serve something more special, Theodore praises her clever use of damp paper to prevent charring.
Theodore notes these small potatoes are usually for staff, while Rena advises him they need a bit more time. Rena fondly recalls Estella teaching her how to cook larger potatoes to avoid burning them or eating them raw.
The Duke watches her with a thoughtful expression as the girl smiles, finally finding a moment of genuine peace.
A flashback reveals Estella warning a young Rhainitis not to eat the hot potato too quickly, or she will burn her mouth.
Little Rhainitis greedily stuffs her face anyway, while the older woman claims she can read the girl's thoughts easily.
Theodore echoes those words in the present, asserting that the pink-haired girl's face reveals every single one of her thoughts.
Rhainitis stares in stunned silence, her blue eyes wide as she processes the Duke's sudden and unsettling insight.
Theodore extends a piece of the roasted vegetable, simply offering the humble snack to the flustered maid with a calm look.
Flustered, Rhainitis tries to decline the offer, but a long and loud rumble sounding from her stomach betrays her true hunger.
Theodore deadpans that her stomach clearly disagrees, prompting a teary and blushing Rhainitis to finally accept the offered food.
The pair sits quietly by the hearth as Rhainitis enjoys the delicious, warm potato while the Duke watches her silently. Theodore asks if her thoughts are currently occupied by the man she loves, catching Rhainitis completely off guard with the question. A sudden, bright flash sounding as Rhainitis covers her head in panic while the Duke confirms his accurate suspicion.
Chibi Rhainitis spirals into a frantic panic while the stoic Duke continues to observe her comical and dramatic reaction. Theodore asks if she is worried about him seeing her thoughts as Rhainitis keeps her face firmly shielded with her hands. Realizing her efforts are futile, Rhainitis slumps in defeat while a soft and mocking pff sounding escapes the Duke's lips. Theodore chuckles as he notes how easily her expressions give her away, leaving the pink-haired girl feeling incredibly exposed. Rhainitis gazes up at him, momentarily lost for words by the Duke's rare and uncharacteristically lighthearted change in mood. A gentle and genuine smile softens Theodore's features as he continues to eat, radiating a peaceful and warm aura.
Leonidas reflects that the Duke might be more like her than she expected, wondering if she has been overthinking his nature. They share a quiet moment by the fire, the atmosphere turning soft and reflective as the bright embers glow between them.
Theodore suddenly reaches out to tilt her head up, Leonidas wondering if her role in this story is shifting in an unexpected way.
His gloved hand rests firmly against her chin, his gaze intensifying as he slowly pulls her closer to him.
Theodore looks at the girl with a focused and unreadable expression, the distance between them shrinking to nearly nothing.
A sudden and soft smack sounding as his fingers brush against her lips, heightening the heavy tension between the two.
They sit in a charged silence, Theodore's hand still lingering on her face, while Leonidas looks completely frozen with shock.
A soft and rhythmic swoosh sounding as flowers bloom in her mind, Theodore leaning in until their noses nearly touch. The Duke continues his slow and deliberate advance, his purple eyes locked onto hers as the romantic tension peaks.
Fearing what comes next, Leonidas squeezed her eyes shut while her heart raced with nervous and confused anticipation.
Theodore bluntly reveals there is just soot on her face, instantly shattering the romantic atmosphere for the flustered and humiliated girl.
Chibi Reinatis flails in absolute embarrassment, her dramatic inner world collapsing at the Duke's mundanely literal and blunt observation.
Blushing furiously, the girl frantically wipes at her face and claims she was simply distracted by the delicious roasted potato.
Leonidas spirals into a self-deprecating panic, convinced she just looked like a total and utter fool in front of the Duke.
Theodore watches her with a subtle and slightly awkward expression, his own face showing a hint of a blush after the encounter.
He notes that her frantic rubbing is only making her... Leonidas realizes her hands are also covered in charcoal, as Theodore reaches for his own handkerchief to help her clean up.
The girl refuses the offer, worrying that she would ruin such a fine and expensive item with her dirty face and hands.
Leonidas insists she will just wash her face properly, her voice rising in a desperate attempt to end the humiliating situation.
Chibi Theodore looks confused while Leonidas continues to spiral internally, her mind screaming for a quick and quiet escape.
Declaring her need to wash up immediately, Leonidas prepares to flee the room to escape the weight of her embarrassment.
A sudden and loud bang sounding as the heavy doors slam shut, Leonidas having made a truly hasty and dramatic exit.
Theodore stands alone in the vast and golden hall, staring blankly at the door where the girl just vanished. A soft and long creak sounding as the door opens just a crack, Leonidas peeking back in with a sheepish look.
She awkwardly admits she forgot to light the fire, while a moved Claire watches her friend's dedication from a distance. As Leonidas finishes her chore, Theodore stands behind her with his shoulders shaking from a sudden and suppressed fit of laughter.
Leonidas huffs in annoyance, feeling the Duke's amusement while she focuses on the crackling and warm flames of the hearth.
A quiet and breathy chuckle sounding as Theodore finally lets his composure slip, truly entertained by the girl's persistent antics.
The Duke reflects on her appearance, privately thinking that her vibrant pink hair looks as sweet as a sugary treat.
His thoughts take a much more intense turn as he recalls the sweetness of her lips, her breath, and even her sweat.
Theodore remembers the sensation of his hand on her skin, his secret obsession with the girl's sweetness becoming clearly evident.
He clenches his hand into a tight fist, wondering if the clumsy girl is actually a secret and powerful enchantress.
A chilling internal confession reveals that Theodore deliberately lied about the soot just to observe the girl's reaction.
The scene flashes back to his intense gaze, confirming the Duke's calculated and deceptive nature toward the completely unsuspecting maid.
Theodore reflects on his hidden desires, wondering if the girl would have allowed more than a simple touch.
Surrounded by a floral aura, the pink-haired girl smiles sweetly, unaware of the Duke's darkening thoughts. Theodore stares at her with intense purple eyes, his gaze lingering on her delicate features. The Duke remains silent, his expression unreadable as he focuses on the girl standing before him.
Theodore is jolted from his thoughts as the maid suddenly calls out to him, breaking the heavy silence.
Rheonidas asks for permission to leave, her blue eyes wide as she stands before the flickering hearth. She bows politely and tells him to call for her again if he needs anything else. Theodore watches her turn to leave, his gaze fixed on her vibrant hair as his thoughts remain hidden. A soft and quick thud sounding as the heavy doors click shut, Rheonidas having finally made her exit. Once alone in the hall, a chibi Rheonidas lets out a long and frantic scream of sheer embarrassment. Trembling in panic, the girl wonders what on earth happened while she was simply trying to fulfill a request. Rheonidas realizes her heart fluttered despite her role, while Theodore watches her from a distance with glowing eyes. She suddenly remembers she's late and fears Sujin will be angry about the wait for food. Theodore watches her run, thinking that regardless of where she goes, she can never truly escape his sight. He sits back in the golden hall, satisfied that she remains within his reach and under his observation. Looking at the fire, the Duke reveals his obsession, viewing himself as a lead, driven by desperate possessiveness. In the forest, the red-haired Instrid pulls back his bow, his sharp gaze fixed on a distant target. A soft and swift whoosh sounding as the arrow is released with expert fluid motion. A sudden and sharp thwack sounding as the arrow hits its mark with perfect accuracy. Rheonidas claps in amazement at the display, surprised to see such impressive archery skills in the woods. She asks if he knows how to shoot, while a surprised Instrud wonders why she is here again. Chibi Instrud boastfully claims he's cool, while Rheonidas huffs that she was just out picking tea herbs. Rheonidas admits she was so fascinated by the archery that she stopped to watch without even noticing. A flashback reveals Instrud's fate as a skilled but doomed knight in the original novel's story. In the present, the red-haired man smugly enjoys the girl's praise for his impressive archery skills. Chibi Instrud boastfully lectures her on the difficulty of being talented with both a sword and a bow. He gestures to a target riddled with arrows, while Rheonidas huffs at his overwhelming self-absorption. Instrud smugly assumes Rheonidas is developing another crush on him, much to the pink-haired girl's annoyance. Curious about the difficulty, Rheonidas picks up the bow, while the red-haired man dismisses her ability. To Instrud's absolute shock, Rheonidas effortlessly pulls the heavy bowstring all the way back. A sudden and sharp crack sounding as the bow shatters, leaving both characters frozen in stunned silence. Wide-eyed and sweating, Instrud wonders how such monstrous strength could come from such a small body. The bow lies shattered on the ground, its spirit seemingly floating away as the girl looks on in horror. Rheonidas frantically apologizes, explaining she only used a little bit of force and didn't mean to break it. Chibi Rheonidas shivers like a fluffy sheep while Instrud stares at her with a bewildered and wary expression. The red-haired man looks at her with a newfound intensity, his sweat-beaded face showing his genuine shock. Instrud suddenly hands her another bow, challenging her to actually try and fire a shot. Rheonidas panics over the possibility of breaking another bow, while Instrud admits he was just being boastful earlier. Chibi Rheonidas decides to give it a go, thinking it looks like fun since she has permission. She takes her stance, vowing to put in much less strength this time to keep the bow intact. A soft and high-pitched creak sounding as she draws the arrow, focusing intently on the bullseye. A sudden and sharp zap sounding as she releases the arrow with intense and focused energy. A close-up of Rheonidas's eye reveals her intense focus as she watches the arrow fly. A loud and rushing whistle sounding as the arrow streaks across the sky with incredible speed. Chibi Rheonidas is shocked to see the arrow completely miss the target and stick into a tree. She sheepishly laughs off her failure, admitting that archery is indeed as difficult as he claimed.
Chibi Instrud suddenly gets right in her face and demands that she become his official apprentice.
He grabs her hands with sparkles in his eyes, his sudden intensity catching Rhainitis completely off guard.
Instrud bursts into the room and loudly demands that Theodore give the pink-haired girl to him. Rhainitis spirals internally, wondering why he brought her to Theodore's room and said something so easily misunderstood.
Theodore stares blankly while a voice teases him about being shocked by the sudden turn of events.
Instrud enthusiastically argues that Rhainitis is a bow-shooting prodigy who belongs on the field rather than cleaning.
Rhainitis frets over her failed archery attempt, dreading a stern lecture from the silent and brooding Duke.
The red-haired knight further baffles Chibi Rhainitis by claiming she is also a master at brewing tea. While Rhainitis blushes from the praise, Instrud insists her talents and love for food make her a diamond in the rough. Theodore abruptly insists she must keep serving him, prompting a loud and frustrated shout from the confused Instrud. The red-haired man suggests a compromise for her training, leaving the black-haired Duke in a moment of hesitant silence. Theodore creates a moment of heavy suspense as he declares that the pink-haired girl is his precious asset. Surrounded by romantic roses, Theodore gazes intensely while Instrud panics in the background over the Duke's ambiguous confession. Rhainitis' heart thumps amidst the floral atmosphere as she wonders what the Duke truly meant by his words. A close-up of Theodore's unreadable face captures the depth of the mystery surrounding his strange and sudden attachment. The romantic aura instantly shatters into comedy as Chibi Theodore reveals he merely meant she is his healing potion. A Chibi Rhainitis wails in comedic disappointment, having expected a far more sentimental explanation for his dramatic declaration. Rhainitis reluctantly accepts her literal role, realizing her presence as a potion is the Duke's only priority right now. Theodore reaffirms his possessiveness, stating that she must remain at his side whenever his condition demands her attention. A soft and weary sigh sounding as Theodore dismisses the red-haired man, who looks visibly annoyed by the rejection. Refusing to give up, Instrud grabs Rhainitis' hand to demand she choose her own path between service and archery. He presents her with a grand choice, contrasting a life of servitude against becoming a stylish and protective archer. Rhainitis hesitates, her face shadowed with deep uncertainty as she prepares to voice her true heart's desire. Theodore remains skeptical of Instrud's claims, his gaze focused on the red-haired knight standing boldly in his chamber. A vision of a beautiful, blonde-haired woman in a green dress appears, representing the sister Rhainitis dreams of saving. The Duke watches the pink-haired girl carefully, waiting to see if she will succumb to Instrud's persistent recruitment. Rhainitis clenches her hands as her determination grows, her mind filled with memories of her past and her goals. She recalls the exhilarating sensation of the bow and vows to experience that powerful, fresh feeling once again. A sudden and energetic shout sounding as Rhainitis boldly declares she will do both roles, shocking both men. She proposes a rigorous schedule of morning archery and afternoon service, standing her ground with a determined expression. Despite her resolve, she worries internally if balancing such demanding duties will eventually push her to her limits. Theodore reflects on a painful memory of being belittled by his father, his expression darkening with a cold intensity. As Rhainitis walks nearby, the Duke's thoughts drift toward his past as a mere appendage to his talented sister. Driven by a hidden talent, he decides he wants to prove his worth through his own dual pursuits. A peaceful vision of Rhainitis sleeping shows her gratitude to the divine for the chance to save her sister. With a bright and genuine smile, the pink-haired girl vows to prove her value in this new life. Theodore and Instrud watch her intently, the room filled with the weight of her ambitious and selfless goal. A chilling gaze flashes in Theodore's eye as he is haunted by a cold and frozen memory of isolation. He wanders through a ghostly and cold library,
remembering the cruel dismissals he faced in his youth. A haunting voice echoes the cruel suggestion that he should have died instead of someone else from his past. Instrude agrees to the arrangement, though Rhinitis remains startled by the speed at which her life is changing. While Chibi Instrud and Rhinitis celebrate, a grumpy Chibi Theodore tells the knight to back away from the girl. Rhinitis promises the Duke that her training will never come at the expense of her original duties to him. Theodore warns her that his condition can strike instantly, his purple eyes burning with an intense and protective focus. He teases her about her short legs, skeptically questioning if she can truly run fast enough during an emergency. To solve the distance problem, Theodore suggests moving rooms, much to the complete and utter confusion of the girl.
A soft and rhythmic thud sounding as Theodore leads her to a grand door, presenting her with a new residence.
Chibi Rhinitis is struck by a wave of shock as she realizes the implications of her new room's location. Inside the lavish room, the pink slime Sujin is seen napping peacefully on a massive golden-threaded bed. A sudden and loud bang sounding as Renatus bursts in, startling the fruit-eating Sujin with the news. She frantically tells the slime to pack up, while Sujin huffs about being interrupted during a delicious snack.
Sujin protests the move, claiming it has grown attached to the cozy bed and the view of the stars.
Rhinitis tries to bribe the slime with promises of more sunlight and amazing doorknobs in their new, bigger home. She enthusiastically explains the mansion's hierarchy, where the staff and other maids reside on the first floor. The mansion's second floor is reserved for the highest-ranking residents, ensuring Theodore and Instrud have ample space. Chibi Rhinitis maps out the hallway, showing her new room is conveniently nestled between the Duke's office and chamber.
Ornate gold carvings and sparkling accents decorate every corner of the magnificent and sun-drenched residence.
A massive, glittering chandelier hangs from the ceiling, illuminating the room with an air of royal sophistication. Rhinitis and her pink slime companion, Sujin, are left breathless by the sheer size and luxury of their new home. The pink-haired girl marvels at the vast sunlit space, realizing the room far exceeds even her wildest dreams. Overjoyed by the luxury, Rhinitis and Chibi Sujin bounce wildly on the massive, incredibly fluffy bed. The girl collapses into the soft mattress, relishing a level of comfort she never thought possible in this life. Contentment washes over Rhinitis as she rests, finally beginning to accept the incredible shift in her circumstances. Every detail, from the ivory vanity to the golden candelabras, reflects the immense wealth of the Duke's estate. Chibi Rhinitis recalls the valet Orti's sheer disbelief when he first learned about her sudden and prestigious room upgrade. She reflects on her original fate as a minor character, shocked to find herself living right next to the Duke. While Rhinitis basks in her new surroundings, Sujin, the pink slime, announces its sudden and intense hunger. A sense of surrealism lingers in the air as the girl contemplates the strange path her life has taken. Theodore gazes toward the golden doors, his presence commanding the room even in his moment of quiet contemplation. Holding a book, the Duke thinks to himself with a hidden sense of satisfaction that everything is proceeding as planned. He recalls the red-haired knight's loud and dramatic entrance, where Instrud boldly demanded Rhinitis for himself. Theodore's purple eyes burn with an intense resolve as he vows to never let anyone take her away again. Relaxing in his chair, the black-haired Duke remembers an old fairy tale about a dragon and a princess. He identifies with the ferocious beast who abducts a beautiful princess, even knowing his presence might cause her harm.
Theodore wonders if he is under a spell, but ultimately decides his potential enchantment doesn't change his feelings.
A soft, radiant vision of Rhinitis appears in his mind, highlighting the profound effect she has on him. The pink-haired girl's genuine laughter amongst the roses serves as a beacon of warmth for the brooding Duke. Reclining peacefully,
Theodore realizes that she is the very first person to ever grant him a sense of relief.
Rhainitis embraces her dual life, balancing the comfort of her new room with grueling physical training under Instrude.
As Theodore's inner turmoil subsides, Chibi Rhainitis notices a strange, rhythmic thumping in the Duke's calm presence.
The pink-haired maid enters a lavish room to find the blonde, wicked daughter already comfortably seated with the Duke.
Theodore and the blonde girl sit in silence while Rhainitis prepares to serve tea under the visitor's watchful eye.
Anxious about the encounter, Rhainitis considers feigning illness just to escape the blonde girl's intimidating and hostile presence. She resolves to stay professional, but the blonde girl suddenly sniffs the air with a look of extreme distaste. The blonde visitor cruelly mocks Rhainitis, loudly questioning if she intends to serve tea while smelling of sweat. She covers her mouth and giggles maliciously, dismissing Rhainitis' polite defense as nothing more than a blatant lie. Rhainitis bristles with silent indignation, deeply hurt by the girl's persistent and unfair picking on her. Breaking the tension, Theodore abruptly commands the pink-haired girl to open the window without looking at her. The blonde girl snickers at the perceived slight, assuming the Duke is also repulsed by the maid's presence. A sharp sting of rejection hits Rhainitis as she obeys, fearing the Duke truly finds her scent offensive. She walks toward the curtains, repeating the Duke's command to herself while insisting she did indeed wash up. Facing the window, Rhainitis bites her lip and fights back tears, refusing to let the humiliation break her spirit. Theodore remains silent, his unreadable gaze fixed on something distant as the blonde guest watches him expectantly. A sudden and quick thud sounding as the girl begins to pull the curtains back, her heart still heavy. Rhainitis is startled by a sudden, brilliant flash of light as the window finally begins to open. She leans into the frame as a pleasantly cool breeze rushes into the room, instantly lifting the heavy atmosphere. Looking out, the pink-haired girl realizes the timing of the wind is always perfect for this time of day. Her sadness vanishes as she realizes Theodore's order was a clever way to help her escape the blonde's harassment. Unaware of the Duke's true intent, the blonde girl leans in and asks him about his ideal romantic partner. Theodore coldly responds that while he has no type, he possesses a very long list of people he dislikes. The blonde girl flinches in shock as he specifically mentions rude people who barge into homes and touch belongings. His gaze turns deadly serious as he adds violent people to the list of those he finds utterly repulsive. Shaking with visible fear, the guest listens as Theodore declares that such individuals are not worth a moment's time.
Rhainitis stands peacefully by the window, watching the scene unfold as the Duke effectively dismisses his unwelcome visitor.
Rhainitis recalls a past incident of being bullied by fellow maids, wondering if Theodore knows her secret.
The blonde guest contemplates clearing up a misunderstanding with Theodore, but hesitates to bring up the past. A sudden and heavy thud sounding as the girl decides to change the subject while Theodore sits nearby. Seated across from him, the blonde girl stutters as she attempts to engage the silent and imposing Duke. Theodore coldly declares his hatred for liars, his intense gaze leaving the guest visibly unnerved and speechless. His purple eyes burn with a sharp intensity, causing the blonde girl to tremble under his piercing scrutiny. A sudden and sharp crack sounding as she panics, leading Theodore to question why she acts guilty. Theodore watches her carefully, noting that her defensive reaction suggests she has indeed done something wrong. Indignation flares within the blonde girl as she wonders why the Duke is protecting a mere servant girl.
She haughtily asserts her status as his fiancé, while a confused Rhainitis watches the scene from the background.
Theodore sighs and commandingly tells the guest to address him directly instead of harassing his personal maid. Using a sudden excuse about urgent business, the blonde girl avoids the tension by deciding to leave immediately. She offers a stiff bow before departing, leaving Rhainitis to wonder about this sudden shift in the atmosphere.
A chilling gaze flashes in the guest's eye as she vows to return, her resentment toward Rhainitis deepening.
A sudden and sharp thud sounding as Rhainitis sticks her tongue out at the departing visitor in triumph.
Chibi, Theodore, and Rhainitis exchange a quiet, meaningful look, the tension of the previous encounter finally fading away.
Rhainitis offers a sincere thank you to the Duke for his help, which he brushes off with indifference.
She reflects on her own past lies, realizing Theodore's blunt honesty makes her feel slightly guilty about her secrets.
Watching the Duke, Rhainitis realizes his harsh words to the guest were a hidden attempt to protect her.
A genuine smile lights up the pink-haired girl's face as she discovers a surprisingly cute side to Theodore. Theodore looks back at her with a softened gaze, the atmosphere between them turning unexpectedly warm and peaceful. Rhainitis promises to handle the carriage duties, and the Duke quietly agrees as they settle back into their routine.
The scene shifts to the bright forest where Rhainitis calls out to the red-haired knight Instrud for training.
She finds herself distracted by thoughts of Theodore's hidden kindness, realizing he is more caring than he appears. Chibi Instrud nods in agreement, acknowledging that the Duke possesses a gentle side beneath his cold exterior.
Rhainitis struggles through a grueling workout, questioning why she chose archery as she gasps for air.
Instrud laughs heartily as the pink-haired girl collapses during squats, her muscles shaking from the intense physical exertion. Chibi Rhainitis endures a training montage of running and push-ups, while Instrud emphasizes that physical strength is fundamental. When she boasts of her talent, Instrud bluntly retorts that her genius won't save her from a weak body. He pokes her cheek while lecturing her on the importance of diligent practice to prevent talent from rotting.
Instrud affectionately ruffles her hair and tells her to keep working hard, leaving the girl stunned and speechless.
Rhainitis looks determined despite the hardship, while Instrud ponders the difficulty of perfecting oneself through talent and effort. Curiosity takes over as the pink-haired girl asks Instrud if Theodore possesses any special talents of his own. Instrud reveals that Theodore lacked natural talent compared to his brother Emin, who was a multi-talented genius. He explains that Emin's death was a waste of talent, as the genius brother could memorize books instantly. Rhainitis learns that the dukedom is in turmoil, realizing the stability of the house died along with Emin. Instrud explains that the imperial family is losing respect for the Caro name as new political factions emerge. His expression darkens as he warns Rhainitis that Theodore will be in grave danger if his power wanes. Shocked by the high stakes, the pink-haired girl realizes the precariousness of the Duke's life in this world. Instrud gives her a knowing, slightly mischievous smile, remarking on the gravity of the secrets he just shared. A sudden and heavy huffing sounding as Chibi Rhainitis begs the knight to ease up on the information. Rhainitis clutches her head, realizing that her awakening didn't give her the full picture of Theodore's past. Visions of books and cogs swirl as she realizes how much she underestimated the danger surrounding the dukedom. She looks down in thought, contemplating the hidden burdens Theodore carries and her own ignorance of his family. Turning back to Instrud, the girl wonders why the story has so many unnecessary and complicated details. She playfully asks Instrud if he has his own secret birth story, catching the red-haired man off guard. A sudden and boisterous laugh sounding as Instrud finds the absurdity of her question to be incredibly amusing. Leaning in close, the knight jokingly asks if he looks impressive enough to have a dramatic and secret past. A sudden and loud wailing sounding as the scene shifts to a lavish room where the blonde girl weeps. The blonde girl cries to her mother, Delma, the Duchess of Caro, about Theodore's cruel treatment of her. Surrounded by elegant flowers, Duchess Delma remains composed as she asks her distraught daughter for a full explanation.